All right, YouTube, I believe I am now currently live, and in just a moment here, unfortunately, the second screen that I look at, of course, says starting soon. Oh, yep, now it's going live, and I've actually got to stop the audio there. Hi, I see that people are already in the chat. That was really fast. I won't be getting to chat right away. I'll be hiding that screen so I'm not tempted to actually speak there. I'll be looking at other screens for a bit here because we do have some results coming in. Now, right now, Florida and North Carolina, and I believe Ohio, they've already, well, actually Ohio at 7:30, I believe. North Carolina and Florida have closed. It's going to take a while to actually get most of those votes in. What I'm seeing here, I'm using Decision Desk HQ. I should probably be using Politico's map as well, and I'll open that in a moment. What I'm seeing is 50% in Florida for Donald Trump. That lead may or may not hold. This is, it's saying 287,000 total votes. Now, I don't know what the actual sum total is going to be. I have to assume that this is related to early voting, in which case that gives Trump an enormous lead, a huge advantage. Ted Cruz, Kasich's down in single digits in Florida, which is expected. Cruz at around 17 now. See, now Donald Trump's at 45%. I fully expect Trump to win Florida. I think Rubio's bluster was primarily to prevent some of his fans from skipping a vote in favor of Rubio. Specifically, even if you're operating from weakness and know you're going to lose the state, you pretend like you think that you can still win it in order to get your more diehard fans to actually come out and vote. But we did have earlier some very early preliminary exit polls from Florida and Ohio. Based on that, it looks like seniors, which make up a huge sum of the central and southern Floridians, broke heavily for Trump. This gives him the advantage that he needs to win the state handily. There alone, Rubio had a slight advantage among Hispanics, although it was a much smaller advantage over Trump than in past parts of this race. So you saw Hispanics went overwhelmingly for people like Rubio and Kasich before. Now, not so much. I think he had less than 50% total, and Trump was up in the upper 20s. It's actually a huge improvement for Trump on the Hispanic voters. What more can you possibly say? As far as Florida goes, regardless of what comes in here, the assumption is when you have several dozen polls over the course of a week, every single one of them is consistent in showing Trump with a double-digit lead. He's going to end up winning the state. Doesn't matter how many late-breaking voters decide in the last few days to actually come out. It doesn't matter if every single one of them votes for Rubio. It's an insurmountable amount of lead. What I'm seeing here on this map basically confirms that. It looks like Trump has already begun to grab up parts of the central Floridian region, which is where he needed to compete. You got to think about Tampa, Pinellas County, also Palm Beach. In that general region of central Florida, that's an important spot. He's ahead in Hillsborough County, which is significant, believe it or not. That one county is a significant indicator of where this is going to go. Up in northern Florida, Trump never had a problem. Southern Florida, Rubio's, when they start coming in, Rubio will close the gap a little bit. He's going to get like the Miami area. They're going to vote heavy. That's his hometown. It's going to vote heavily in favor of Rubio, but it's not ultimately going to help if Central Florida goes for Trump. He's still going to win by double digits. In Ohio, we don't have any reporting in that I'm seeing yet. Like I said, I will open Politico as well. Also earlier, Trump managed to win the Northern Mariana Islands with 72% of the vote, getting all 9 delegates. Now, the delegate count obviously doesn't mean diddly squat. It's only 9 delegates. I think Wyoming had 10. And that went just about as heavily for Ted Cruz yesterday as the Northern Mariana Islands did for Trump today. But it is an indicator that he has support amongst the Asian community in a sort of Commonwealth-style territory. Because really, you remember Puerto Rico went heavily for Rubio. Trump managed to grab up Hawaii, which nobody was expecting. Doesn't matter delegate-wise. Nobody fucking cares as far as the delegates go. I mean, it's too few delegates for it to make that big a difference unless the race is super, super close. The same is true of Northern Mariana Islands. But it's an indicator that it's no longer just white lower and middle class individuals that have amalgamated behind Trump. We had a YouGov poll today for 53% in favor of Trump, totally crushing his competition. That's a national poll. Now, with the CNN poll that came out weeks ago, it showed Trump at 49. I said, ignore it. Ultimately, it's an outlier. It doesn't sway me into thinking that Trump is anywhere near that. Maybe 40, maybe 42%, but certainly not 49. YouGov is a different story. YouGov has been one of the most accurate firms. Unless you're looking at a niche firm like Trafalgar, the Trafalgar Group has a huge sampling size compared to most polls in its methodology and has been very accurate. That, by the way, showed Trump up 20 in Florida, which is another good reason to believe that he'll win by a large margin here. However, YouGov has outperformed most other firms so far in this season. It also was very good in 2012. A lot of people said, well, it's probably a one-off because, you know, it's web-based as opposed to some of these firms that are doing like phone calls and stuff. It's more opt-in and online. But they've actually blown most of the other polling firms out of the water. There's a reason you're not seeing Gallup polls amalgamated on RCP. It's because they performed so fucking poorly in 2012. No one took them seriously anymore. They were 7 points off on average in the same direction. It's obvious that their methodology in the modern age has no longer worked. This is sort of the similar story with the RNC and how their tactics, the sort of TV era and early internet era tactics of a candidate like Ted Cruz are no longer working, or like Marco Rubio, or even Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has kind of embraced the digital culture, but she's so old and out of touch and really blue-blooded and rich. She just doesn't connect with people properly. You know, Sanders is, I think, 4 or 5 years older, and yet he's got a much more massive capability to capitalize on the Democratic side as far as the web goes. And I would say the new web, the new internet is in its 4th epoch. It's in the meme epoch. The social media era actually is kind of over, and we've now been replaced by the instant gratification of memes, which sometimes are deliberate nonsense designed solely for the extremely low attention span, younger demographics. Trump is ruling over this demographic. He's got also the largest social media presence. It's just completely dominant. Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side has a significant advantage there as well. I'm going to turn back to Florida. Yeah, results are still coming in. 1% of precincts reporting Trump is near 50%. Rubio's stalled out around 25%, and it looks like Broward, Palm Beach, and Pinellas, 3 important sort of central region counties, are all going in favor of Trump. So I'm just going to call the race for Trump in Florida at this point. I don't even need to wait for a major news organization at this point. It's basically unthinkable that he's going to lose there. I'm still not seeing any results anywhere else, but give me a moment here. Let me open Politico and see if they've got their fucking map up here. They usually have a live map. Let's see. Honestly. Yeah, of course you wouldn't put it on your front page. Map March 15th. And like I said, for those who aren't aware, I'm not looking at the chat right now. So if I'm not responding to you, it's because I'm not seeing what you're saying. I'm trying to keep on this and make sure that I've got a... Oh, yeah, you're trying to load a video on me. I knew it. I knew Politico would try that. Yes. Yeah, 0.4. Oh, that's odd. Decision Desk is actually ahead in reporting. Usually Politico is. But yeah, 47% for Trump, 24% for Rubio, 15.6% for Cruz, 7% for Kasich. Jeb Bush getting almost 4% of the vote. This is funny. Over 10,000 people apparently have voted for Jeb Bush, even though he hasn't been in the race for several months. Hell, Ben Carson, he's managed to get about 4,000 votes. Now, doesn't that sort of count as support for Donald Trump in a way, since he's endorsed him? But looking down here, nobody else is reporting in, nothing from Ohio or North Carolina on either of these sites. It'll be a while before we see anything. But Florida, remember, 99 delegates. It's the big prize of the night. The other is Ohio. Now, let me quickly go through. I'll look at chat in a moment as well. Let me go through and say what I think is going to happen. Trump wins Florida. You can almost call it already at this point. He's so far out ahead with so many of the counties at least giving preliminary numbers. It's almost unthinkable that he won't get it. Rubio, I would hope, after losing his home state by double digits, will drop out. But he claims, he said before, he would drop out if he lost Florida. And Kasich said the same about Ohio. Now they're both going back on it. I have a sneaking suspicion Kasich's own internal reporting may show a different number than the polls. Maybe he's actually behind Trump. I still give him a small advantage. You got to realize, he is a popular sitting governor. The exit poll analysis showing that the vast majority sort of core voters within the GOP there, which are white, lower and middle class, working class voters, the fact that they're going heavily for Trump in the exit poll analysis does not tip my prediction in favor of Trump in Ohio quite yet. Does he have a chance to win? Yes, of course he does. Certainly a much better chance than Trump has of losing Florida. But I still give my preliminary prediction that Kasich holds Ohio, if only by a tiny margin. I could be wrong. Ultimately, I hope that I'm wrong. What I want to see at this point, I want to see Trump crush his competition. He's the only person capable of leading the Republican Party. I don't even have to vote for the dude to realize that he's better than the other candidates, flaws and all. I'm not a Trump voter. I'm a libertarian. I'll be voting for Gary Johnson, but I wish Trump well, partially because I want to see the DNC and the RNC ripped apart. It's now obvious to most people that are voting. I think that the voting totals here and in other races show it. Most people in the country are sick and fucking tired of the Republican and Democratic parties. They don't trust either of them. They realize that they're lying, and they're being honest about the fact that they're lying and rigging votes and dirty everything else at this point as well. They're being very open about the fact that the RNC wants to crush their own frontrunner. The DNC has been very honest about the fact that it really wants Hillary to be nominated. Now, she will win fair and square. She's well ahead in not just in super delegates at this point, but as well in delegates based on voting. So nobody can say Bernie Sanders was robbed of, when he loses, which he will, nobody can say he was robbed of the nomination, but he won't even come out and say, by the way, that he won't run as an independent. What I'd love to see, I want to see Trump versus Hillary. And then I want to see Bernie Sanders drop out and run as an independent. I want to see Jesse Ventura amping his game up. I want to see Gary Johnson and the Libertarian Party doing the same. I want to see McAfee running as an independent who didn't get the Libertarian nomination. I want a whole gaggle of oddballs. Vermin Supreme too. The American Nazi Party, the fucking Communist Party of America. I want to see it all laid out there for people, because I want people to see that there are more options than just Republican or Democrat, because the two fucking parties, anyone with common sense realizes that the Republican insiders that control 99% of the party, the Democratic insiders, the DNC, that control 99% of the Democratic Party, are exactly the same. They're more worried about their own candidates potentially winning. The DNC is more worried about Sanders winning than it is about the Republicans. The Republican Party is more worried about Trump winning than it is beating Hillary. This shows you proof positive. Nobody could possibly miss this. The parties are the same goddamn thing. They get donated to by the same fucking people. They pass the same shitty laws over and over. People keep voting for these morons, expecting a different result. It's never going to fucking happen. We know it's never going to happen. Trump appears to have just overtaken Rubio in the Miami-Dade region, which, if that's true, well, then the race is over at that point. If that's, I don't expect that to continue. I expect Rubio to pull ahead. But Trump is currently dominating everything other than Seminole County, where right now other is actually ahead, which I assume is just because of a low reporting total. Maybe somebody is voting. Maybe somebody's running who's from that county that's just not on the ballot, and they're getting a lot of write-ins. And then Cruz, who is leading with 100% of the vote in Lee County, I'm going to assume, again, that's because they reported his total first. Cruz gets a little bit of a boost sometimes at the beginning of voting simply because of his name. Alphabetically, specifically, Cruz is ahead of Kasich and Trump and Rubio, alphabetically. So in some of these places, they tally it up, apparently person by person. So Cruz is always widely ahead. Yes, Rubio just overtook Trump in Miami-Dade, but he's not a I'm going to assume that that voting total is going to change as well. Yeah, it's still 0% reporting. So I'm going to look through and see if we've got any other results really quickly, and then I'll go to chat at some point here in the next few minutes. Nothing in yet in Ohio or North Carolina, but further predictions really quickly first. North Carolina, I think it's safely for Trump. Part of the Deep South, the only remaining true Dixieland state to report in. I think it's unthinkable that they're not going to vote with their Dixieland brethren, but it's proportional. I mean, Ted Cruz will get a few delegates there. Rubio could get a delegate or two, and probably that'll be the only delegates he gets all night, which means screw him if he doesn't drop out. Kasich might get a delegate or two. Ultimately, Trump will get the lion's share, and then Ted Cruz will probably get a dozen delegates or something in North Carolina. So it's not a huge victory for Trump, and it's got less delegates anyway. The big prize is Florida. Florida, almost certain for Trump. Ohio, I don't know. A few days ago, I said Kasich had a fairly large systemic advantage, technically a small demographic advantage because he's a sitting governor there. But I think a larger advantage in terms of momentum. He had much more presence there because he was specifically focusing just on his home state, which really gets the crowds moving. But at this point, I think it's almost a toss-up, because Kasich's words eerily echo Rubio, who has to know that he's losing. And the only reason I can think of that he would be talking like that is if his own internal polling showed he might very well lose Ohio. I don't expect him, if he does, it'll be by a small margin, but he could. Missouri and Illinois, I think it's either or. I expect Trump to get one of the two, and I think there's a better chance of him winning both than losing both. But the amount of polling that's available just isn't there to say. But they're open primaries, which means he's going to get a slew of independent voters. He's more likely to win Illinois, where there are 2 polls instead of just 1, which is really fucking stupid for Missouri. Missouri has a lot of evangelicals in the western reaches of the state, as opposed to the urban side. They tend to be Cruz supporters. They're not Dixieland nativist evangelicals. They're not Baptists. They're Pentecostals and so forth in the heartland. And Cruz has been sweeping them up. So if he has high turnout, then Cruz will probably win Missouri. But there is a very slight Trump advantage in both of these states. And it's well within the realm of possibility that Trump could win both of them. Now, their allocation, Missouri and Illinois, you get a certain amount from winning the state, and you get a certain amount from winning each region that supplies delegates. Illinois and Missouri both being sort of similar situations. Trump will get the lion's share of the delegates, and both Cruz would have to settle with a minority under those circumstances. But at the same time, even if Cruz wins both of them, Trump still ends up getting delegates, and it's going to be a hell of a lot larger a total after winning Florida than Cruz will get. I'm going to go back to Florida. I have a feeling that Florida is going to be a called race long before we get to 20% of the vote in, because it's not even close. Trump is 17 points ahead with 6.4% counted. It looks like he's managed to grab up all of Central Florida if this total remains similar. There's 15% in Pinellas County. Only 2% in Hillsborough, but again, he's leading by more than 15 points. So, who fucking cares? We're going to go back here and see if we've got any results at all for any of these other states before I go to chat. And, of course, nothing. I don't know why it's so slow. Maybe I should refresh this. Maybe this isn't live updating and I'm just being stupid. We'll try that and see what happens. No, still nothing in. It's pretty funny. Hillary Clinton keeps getting delegates before any of the totals are in. She's somehow she's got 8 delegates in North Carolina before a vote has been counted. Sanders managed to get a whole 1, 8-1 in North Carolina, 13-1 in Ohio. She got 20 delegates in Illinois without a vote being cast. These are all like super delegates, and she's handily beating Sanders in Florida. Now, here the thing is, in Florida, Rubio attempted to conflate the surprise result in Michigan, where Sanders came behind, with how he expects to perform in Florida. The difference is Sanders was already rising during that polling, and the polling methodology was off. Rubio is declining during the polling, and the polling methodology, thus, it wouldn't matter if it's off. No, he's not going to win his home state. Rubio has virtually no chance at this point. He's 120,000 votes behind. It's going to be very fucking difficult for him to make up a nearly 20-point deficit with even 6% of the vote counted. I just don't think that it's possible. I expect the race to be called before 20% is in. And I keep hoping that they'll give at least some preliminary results elsewhere, but I guess Florida's just really quick. People were worried, by the way, quick aside and then chat. People were worried about, oh, Trump's name's not on my ballot. That was just fear-mongering, folks. These people were obviously registered as Democrats, didn't realize it, tried to show up and vote for Trump only to realize, no, your name's not on the fucking Democratic ballot. You know, something like that appears to, these people could have switched affiliations. You know, independent voters certainly can sign right up. And in Ohio, it functions almost more like an open primary, which is why I say it's now up in the air if Kasich can actually hold it. Missouri as well is an open primary. I originally thought it was a closed primary, which is why I now give a slight advantage to Trump there. But no, as far as I know, there's no actual evidence of vote rigging in Florida. The amount of rigging that would have to go on after that many polls have been conducted would be absolutely incredible. And Rubio, I don't think has enough allies in state, being a first-term senator, to pull it off. Jeb Bush, you know, could have pulled a few strings for him, but really, who's going to listen to Jeb Bush at this point since his goose is cooked? So I'm going to go to chat here and oh, Trump is leading in North Carolina. There's North Carolina results. Let me refresh the fucking page. Well, I'm not seeing anything in North Carolina, at least not on Decision Desk. Let me check Politico. Where are you seeing that Trump is leading in North Carolina? Because I mean, I expect him to win the state, but I'm not seeing any results from there. Yeah, exactly. If Trump has 45% of the fucking vote when there's 3 other people splitting the other 55, and you've already got over 1 million votes or something cast, what the fuck? There's no way that Rubio is going to raise up that much. Ted Cruz would probably be more likely to supplant him. Third parties have been in the White House all the time. The Republican Party was a third party when it was first formed. The Whig Party also held presidents various times against the Democratic Republicans, and they were even the populist movement. Millard Fillmore, who, I mean, he was a vice president who got in because I think the president kicked the bucket at the time. But yeah, third parties have actually held the White House many times. Any Republican president is technically a third party president. The Republican Party didn't form until the 1800s. Yeah. Jeb, they were talking on Fox. I thought it was funny. They were talking about, does Jeb Bush's endorsement matter? No, you fucking morons. It doesn't matter. If he endorsed somebody, they'd probably lose half of their support. Nobody wants Jeb Bush's support. No. Sanders would absolutely never accept a VP from Hillary, nor would she offer it to him. She'd be afraid of getting her liberalism upstaged. You can't have a socialist on the VP slot. I mean, especially he's old like she is. Can't get, he draws in some aspects of the youth vote, but let's face it, it's the far left social justice warrior youth vote. It's not the new wave centrist Democrat vote or anything like that. Trump is getting all those people. But yeah, I'll be looking at the comments for a bit while I wait for results to come in from Ohio and North Carolina. Cruz is not against the establishment. Cruz is very much part of the establishment. He worked for George W. Bush in an advisory position. He was on the Council of Foreign Relations. His wife was a chair at Goldman Sachs. He's a sitting U.S. senator. And he accepted money from Trump, from the donor class. Trump literally funded Ted Cruz during his Senate run. He's as inside as you can get. We have to realize that the insiders within the GOP are split into several groups. You've got the neocons, the people like Jeb Bush who hold most of the power. And then you have the evangelicals, sort of the far right, people like Cruz and Santorum. The only reason that they hold office is in really, really deep red, highly religious states, they're capable of getting elected, but they get completely muzzled when they actually get to Congress. But that doesn't make them outsiders. It just makes them an unwanted fringe. It makes them, they're basically the Tea Party. Ted Cruz is sort of a Tea Party, far right, reactionary. That doesn't make him an outsider. He's still taking money from the same corporate machine. He just happens to have views that make him unelectable. Even the neocons aren't dumb enough to think that Ted Cruz is capable of getting elected. And I predict they will back Trump before they back Cruz, specifically because Cruz is going to lock himself into the heartland. He may not win any states tonight, even though he certainly has an outside chance in Illinois, and perhaps a little bit more than an outside chance in Missouri, depending on turnout, depending on who actually shows up. But no, Cruz, you will never see a President Ted Cruz. The Republican Party itself is becoming less religious, let alone the country as a total. He would never be able to energize a substantial number. I mean, look, a third of the Republican Party, possibly as high as half the Republican Party right now, is backing someone who has no political experience. And to them, somebody being a sitting senator is a huge disadvantage. They would never tolerate it. They would abandon the party and take not just the independent votes that Trump's getting, but a lot of the GOP votes to a third party ticket. If Trump runs independent, they'd back him. If he chooses not to, then they'd probably end up voting for the Libertarian Party, because it'd be the closest possible approximation to something vaguely right-wing that's nonetheless not associated with the RNC. And you can bet Gary Johnson would come out and say, oh, come vote for us. We believe like you do, except we don't have a problem with drugs and gay people. And, you know, most of Trump's fans don't care about those things. Half of them are probably potheads, you know, so who gives a fuck? Trump is likely to nominate Kasich as his vice president if he nominates anybody who's actually been in the race. Otherwise, I've said this, I expect Trump will choose a governor, either former or sitting. They'll be quiet, soft-spoken, very well-liked, and they'll be from a swing state. Kasich fits the bill, actually. The only problem with Kasich is Trump, I don't think Trump's ego will allow him to nominate someone for the VP slot who has actually campaigned against him. I think Chris Christie maybe. I don't think so, though. I mean, it would be stupid to nominate Chris Christie unless he's specifically just trying to grab up the New York metro area and New Jersey and turn them red. But the problem is he would run the risk of losing some of the... He would lose Iowa at that point, potentially. For example, because it's a more religious swing state, and a lot of those religious individuals, they already know that Trump's not religious. He can pretend to be all day. They're going heavily for Cruz. He's got the Deep South sewn up, but the thing is, the Deep South is always voting for the Republicans lately. The only place that he gets an advantage with his nativism is Florida. But I'm going to go back really quick here and look at these fucking polls. I mean, voting results. Still not seeing anything from any of these other states. I don't know why they haven't called the race in Florida. You get almost 20% in, and Trump's leading by 20 points. I would think the writing would be on the fucking wall at this point. Maybe they've already called it and they just haven't updated the page. Oh, we've got some results from North Carolina. Trump leading by, it looks like, about 8 points over Ted Cruz. You know, obviously, Ted Cruz has some support in the more religious areas other than like some really Baptist strongholds. North Carolina is a little bit less religious than its southern cousin, but not so much that Trump's going to get less than 40% of the vote, which is all he fucking needs. Kasich's coming in at 12, so add those together. Ted Cruz gets denied it. Rubio's at 10. Rubio's doing better tonight. He's actually in the double digits in North Carolina. He's still in fourth place, but at least he broke into the double digits. So I think he gets like 2 or 3 delegates from that. That's probably all he'll fucking win tonight. By the way, Ted Cruz, by coming in a fairly close second, which I believe he will, be about maybe 5, maybe 10 points behind Trump in North Carolina, I predict. He'll get a fairly decent number of delegates here. He can also get delegates in Missouri and Illinois, but he can't win Ohio and he can't win Florida. That's more than half the delegates of the night right there. Trump could very well run the table on both of those. Trump does have a chance of winning Ohio. And Kasich's attitude of, well, maybe I wouldn't drop out if I lost my home state. I would be willing to bet his internal polling is a little bit less rosy a picture than the Ohio polls that have been released by outside groups. Does this mean he loses Ohio? No, I still give him an advantage, but it's less of an advantage, I said, than before. Before I would have said it was like 75, 80% chance Kasich holds Ohio, at least by a couple points. Now I think it's down to 60% or so. It's no longer a sure thing. There's a chance that Trump could pull off an upset in Ohio. By the way, if Trump wins Ohio and Florida, then the race is effectively over. He becomes the inevitable nominee because there are no longer enough delegates left for Ted Cruz to compete either, unless he intends to win basically all of the remaining states, which is it going to happen? I think all of us know that it's not. So if Trump does manage to pull off, right now Trump is winning everything in Florida except for Miami-Dade County, which is sort of Rubio's own hometown area where he's done all of his campaigning. He's trying to, maybe he's going to run for mayor. Maybe he's going to drop down. He'll no longer be Senator Rubio because, I mean, is he going to win fucking re-election after getting crippled in his own home state? Probably not. He's 19 points behind with 20% cast. Insurmountable. Trump has won Florida. Miami-Dade, maybe he's going to run for mayor of Miami. Then he can snort all the cocaine that he wants. When people talk about him, you know, maybe he's on drugs. He's from Miami, folks. Yeah, he probably does snort a line every now and again. It's like coke snorting. I mean, he is of Cuban descent. Not to be bigoted or anything, but the cartel activity in that region, yeah, it's importing the finest coke from Colombia and Peru and places like that. It goes right through Miami's ports, like the ports didn't even have any security. Yeah, he probably does snort a line once in a while. By the way, I don't even care if we have a drug-addled president. I mean, FDR, I guess, by the accounts of the Democrats, at least, did pretty well, and you can be sure he probably took the occasional opium pipe. But Florida, yeah, Trump has a basically insurmountable lead there. It's odd. Let's see, 0% reporting for Politico. Yeah, Politico is actually behind tonight. Usually it's got a significantly higher amount reporting in than Decision Desk. Tonight it's I have to assume Decision Desk could really up their game a little bit or something like that. But let's go back to chat for a while here and just rant. Also, did you see in the news, I think that one of the things that might be driving Trump up is this attack in Ankara. I warned quite some time ago that Ankara, as the capital of Turkey, with Turkey involved in so many regional conflicts, was going to destabilize. I actually warned my then girlfriend, who was a Turk, that Ankara was no longer a particularly safe place in the world to be. And I was ignored. People tend to suffer when they ignore my good advice, because if I'm analyzing a situation I myself am not part of, I'm giving unbiased, sound, logical, reasonable advice based on my understanding of the world. So yeah, people over there are suffering. I feel sorry for them. The Turks get a bad reputation, but you have to realize they're in NATO. They're a solid U.S. ally, and they, not the Israelis, are actually the only functional democracy in the Middle East. The problem is Erdogan, Tayyip, who is hated by his own people, keeps rigging the elections there. They do have rigged elections, specifically because their constitution doesn't appear to be protecting the media from the court system, which has utterly destroyed their liberty. If I was in that region of the world, I'd be begging for the government to join up with the European Union so that I could gain access to the open border system and fucking leave Turkey. And it doesn't help that they've got millions of Syrian refugees and East and South Asians from like Pakistan there either. They're the ones doing the attacking. The Turks just want to eat their doner kebab, honestly. You look at the urban areas there, it basically does look like Europe. Unless you go into the region of so-called Kurdistan. By the way, the Kurds are a terrorist group, and I have no respect for them. They're getting bombed on a constant basis by ISIS, the PKK, the FSA has done all sorts of shit along the border. Al-Qaeda fucks shit up in Turkey. Turkey's not reestablishing anything. The Saudis, you have to understand that the Saudis are the ones in control of Mecca. They're the ones funding these militants. The Turks are nationalizing. Erdogan has a cult of personality. He's opposed to this move, but he's playing buddy-buddy with the West, specifically to try to keep himself from getting attacked. It's not working, which is why Turkey eventually, I predict, will invade Syria, and the war will spiral out of control very quickly. Russia is leaving Syria right now for a very good reason. I hate to tell you this, but the overstretched Russian economy, with slacking productivity and continuous problems with infrastructure, is not capable of waging a long-term conflict unless it's right on their own border, which is why they've chosen to stay in the Ukraine, involved there, and not get involved further with Syria. They're leaving Syria specifically because if the Turks begin operating there, the Russian supply lines have to go through Turkey, through the Bosphorus, or they have to fly all the way the fuck around instead of sending ships. They can't operate under such a situation. They don't have enough projective force, especially when any attack on Turkey triggers several different military contracts with NATO. NATO will nuke Russia back to the Stone Age. Russia will nuke NATO back to the Stone Age. And, the entire world gets destroyed. Putin is maybe a bit loony, but he's not quite that loony. He got caught with his pants down ultimately in Syria, because he was spending all of his time he wasn't fighting ISIS, let's face it. He was fighting the FSA. We're not fighting ISIS either. We're primarily trying to kill off Assad's sort of peripheral allies in the region. The Turks are sort of becoming ambivalent to the Kurds as long as they're on the other side of the border. They're probably the only ones bombing ISIS at this point, and even they are spending more time fighting the FSA. The entire area is just fucked up. Yeah, let's see what the Ohio results are, if I can actually see any on my fucking end. Decision desk is now slowing down, which is really sad. Florida, just call the fucking race already. Why are people saying that Trump's winning Ohio when no results are in for Ohio yet? 40, yeah, Trump is certainly performing on par with the polls. The problem with Ohio is there are only a few recent polls. 2 of them showed a tie, which doesn't give us any idea who the fuck's going to win. And 2 of them showed Kasich mildly ahead, which may or may not be outliers. I hope that Trump wins Ohio, if only because by knocking Kasich and Rubio out in a single night, the GOP establishment gets its 2-man race, which means Trump will defeat Ted Cruz handily. Because Cruz would have to win basically every remaining state to reach the total he needs. Trump would no longer face any competition for any of the eastern states. There'd be no brokered convention. And it would fuck with all the people that I hate the most. People like Glenn Beck, people like Karl Rove, all these fucking neocons. They're just a bunch of shit. Hillary could put an R after her name and she would basically sound a lot like Karl Rove or Glenn Beck, other than she mentions Jesus a little bit less often. They're all the same thing. They're all neoconservatives. They're all idiots. Trump is sort of the missing link between the paleocons and the neocons, with a few nativistic beliefs, sort of like a Barry Goldwater or a Humphrey era individual, which is better than a neocon. Not much better, but certainly more tolerable. Certainly better economic views. And then Sanders, he's a socialist. He's actually a leftist. Hillary Clinton's not. Hillary Clinton's just a corporate con. The thing is, if someone is utterly controlled by donors, utterly controlled by corporations and, the big banks, the lobbies and whatever, their views are going to be identical because they're being forced to vote a certain way. Therefore, it doesn't matter what title they ascribe themselves to. They're simply going to spend their time justifying what the donors have told them to do to the public and couch it in terms of, well, I'm a real liberal because liberal is actually, liberals bail out banks. Liberals do this. Liberals do that. Obama had to do this. Remember when he bailed out Wall Street? He said, oh, well, we don't want everyone to suffer. We don't want the currency to collapse. We don't want the economy to continue going south. So we have to give 700 billion taxpayer dollars to a bunch of fucking corporations that are going to waste it. Now, we didn't actually need to do that. We should have done what Iceland did and hang those bankers, dissolve them, pay back the people who actually had holdings in the banks, and say, fuck the CEOs and the upper management. Just throw them in the ocean or something. We should have done that. But we didn't. And that's because Obama's not a liberal. And the Republicans, by the way, didn't help in this. They kept saying Obama's a Marxist, Obama's fucking socialist. No, he's not. He's just another corporate so-called liberal who's doing the same shit the Clintons do. The only different person on the Democratic side at any point, really, other than Jim Webb, who is sort of a blue dog Democrat, sort of a deep South style war hawking Democrat, oddly enough, is Bernie Sanders, of course. And that's why he's losing. He's getting crushed under by the corporate machine of Hillary Clinton. However, Trump's extremely rich. Unlike Sanders, he doesn't need grassroots support. And so he's actually, in a way, Trump reminds me a little bit of Teddy Roosevelt, honestly. Oddly enough, more progressive, yes, on some issues than Hillary Clinton. He's very rich, like the Roosevelt family, of course, was. Well-spoken, although he has a tendency to get muddled sometimes. Actually, he gets muddled a lot, but he manages to work his way through it. At some point, he eventually remembers what the fuck he was talking about. He's seen as sort of the strong man, a Teddy Roosevelt similarity. He does care about workers. He's actually employed people, unlike most of these people. You got to realize, sometimes you get a career politician, they've never actually done anything other than be a politician. They were born into wealth, but they didn't actually do anything with that wealth other than sit on their family name. This is sort of how the Clintons are. They're just modern-day blue bloods. Bernie Sanders was sort of the social activist. He's a lifelong politician, yes, at least since the 70s, but he was at least a social activist before that. Now, people on the Democratic side are going to respect him for that. Are they going to respect Hillary and vote for her if she's the nominee? A lot of them, I would answer no. I think she's utterly and completely doomed. I don't even think that the most optimistic Republican understands just how poorly Hillary Clinton is going to do in the general election. Specifically because my assumption at this point, looking at what I'm seeing tonight, is that Trump is going to be the nominee. When Trump says, by the way, here's something to focus on, something very, very important. Trump hasn't said this, but I can tell you that this is what he means when he talks about other things. Trump has said, the last person Hillary wants to face is me. Do you think that this might have something to do with the fact that he is on a deep personal level with her and has given her hundreds of thousands of dollars and has dirt on her? He knows about all the corrupt. He probably has it in her own words in archived emails or in recorded phone calls. He knows that she's corrupt. He can prove that she's corrupt. He's just not mentioning that yet because he doesn't want to fuck her up before she gets nominated. If he blows her out of the water now, he has to face Sanders. He's never donated to Sanders. He knows if he gets nominated and he lets Hillary get nominated, doesn't go after her too hard, he'll attack her occasionally, but mostly he's just attacking the other Republicans. He's waiting until she gets the nomination clinched. He wants her to be the nominee because he's going to absolutely fucking destroy her in the first few weeks. She won't last. She'll be less popular than Nixon by the time he's through dishing the dirt. I think that he has been collecting tabs on politicians through his donations and interpersonal relationships for decades. I think he has enough dirt on DC and the rest of the donor class to destroy most of them completely. So there's no reason for Trump to try to get Bernie the nomination because he probably doesn't have any dirt on Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is a weak second-tier candidate. He's a self-proclaimed socialist, and he's Jewish. Now, it would be a perfect world if this didn't matter, I suppose, for most people. Some people watching this probably disagree. However, there's still a little bit of a hesitation by certain groups within this country, other than the evangelicals who aren't going to vote for the Democratic Party anyway. They're all Republicans. They're all voting for Ted Cruz. There's a little bit of a hesitation with a lot of people, especially in the urban areas, regarding Jewish individuals. The long-nosed Jewish lawyer stereotype comes to mind. The sort of rubbing the hands together and grubbing after shekels thing. That sort of imagery, as you've seen on the internet, I assure you, is still very much alive. Look at Lieberman. Look at what happened to Joseph Lieberman. It doesn't even matter what policies he puts forward. He's a Jewish individual, which gives him a disadvantage. He's the first Jew, by the way, to win any primary in the United States in our history. It's a political first that he's already managed to accomplish. No one else can lay claim to that for the rest of time. But he's also a self-proclaimed socialist. Now, this doesn't matter with the sort of social justice warrior voters that are voting for Bernie anyway. They don't care. But 0% of Republicans are going to vote for a self-proclaimed socialist. virtually 0% of independents would support a self-proclaimed socialist, and virtually 0% of the over 50 Democrats would vote for. So Hillary Clinton is sweeping the floor as far as the older votes go. Bernie is leading amongst the youth, the under 25s, breaking even with sort of the Gen X voters and getting a few of the sort of baby boomer voters. Everywhere else, he's getting completely crushed. Also, his voters are overwhelmingly white. What do we know about the Democratic Party? Most of the Democratic core at this point is not made up of white voters. It's made up of Hispanic and black voters. Bernie Sanders would have 0% chance of winning the general election, just as, by the way, Hillary has a virtually 0% chance. She's not going to win. You will not see a President Hillary Clinton. She hasn't energized anyone. Look at the voting totals coming out on the Democratic side. It's like half or a third of what the Republicans are getting. And supposedly, if you listen to Salon or Gawker or something, supposedly it's the weakest crop of GOP candidates who have ever tried to attain the nomination. And yet they're pulling in 2 or 3 times as many votes. And yes, by the way, that is Trump doing that. You don't have to like him to understand why the race on the Republican side is energized. It's because he's pumping the Republican Party so full of Reagan Democrats and independents that he's choking the life out of every other fucking candidate. Hillary can't do that. Who the fuck? Have you ever even met a person who says they like Hillary unironically? I haven't. It might be because I'm in Bernie Sanders' home state, which also went heavily for Trump on the GOP side. But I can't imagine that a lot of people are really, they may vote for Hillary, but are they excited? No, nobody is, because she's fucking boring. But yeah, we'll look at what's happening. I don't know why they haven't called the race in Florida, my man. Trump's 18 points ahead. Well, yeah, 19 points ahead with almost half the votes cast. He's leading everywhere but Coke City down in Miami, which is where Rubio has his foam parties. I'm going to assume that Rubio probably doesn't get a late surge of voters in counties he's losing in many cases by 10 to 15 points. So, yeah, I mean, it's just fucking retarded. Now, Kasich is leading Donald Trump by 13 points right now in Ohio, but that's with 0% of the precincts supposedly reporting. These maps can change suddenly. Like I said, I give Kasich a slight advantage in Ohio. And if you were to put a gun to my head and say, well, which one is going to win? I'd say Kasich, obviously. But there's still an outside chance Trump could win there. It's just not a huge chance. It's possible. There's only like 20,000 votes separating them. There's going to be quite a few votes at the end of the night. Also, take a look at what happens on this map. A lot of the small outlying counties are going Trump. The rest appear to be a slight advantage for Kasich. That's not an overwhelming lead, but it's a pretty decent lead, even if it is 0% of the precincts reporting. Kasich probably, though, will win Ohio. Most people expected that. You saw the RNC folks trying to say, oh, well, maybe Kasich will lose. See, they're trying to get Trump voters' hopes up so it looks like he's underperforming if he loses a state where he had a less than 50-50 chance of winning in. That's specifically what happened. North Carolina, Trump is still ahead there. For some reason, it's not updating the actual totals. Let's look at Politico. Oh, right now, oh, goodness. Let's see, how many votes is that actually tallying? Yeah, Decision Desk is ahead of Politico right now. So that very close gap in Ohio that you're seeing on Politico probably is probably not accurate. Kasich is probably about 10 points ahead, not just 2 points ahead. I could be wrong. Politico does have generally good accuracy here. Politico is also showing Trump handily ahead in North Carolina, about 6 or 7 points, actually almost 8 points ahead of Ted Cruz. Remember, we won't see any results from Missouri or Illinois for some minutes at least now. It's 8 o'clock now, and I believe that's when the polls close in both of these states. As far as Florida goes, though, at what fucking point are they going to call the fucking race? With half the vote counted and you're 20 points ahead, I would assume that you've won. Now, watch right at the end, like 1 million new votes come in from some non-existent city, all marked Marco Rubio. And it's just got Jeb Bush's face on the screen. Ha ha, I screwed you again, just like I did in 2000. That would be funny enough to be worth Trump losing Florida. Everyone would get a good laugh. Remember, it was Jeb that gave his little or big brother, depending on whether you're talking about size or age, the election in 2000. Al Gore did win the popular vote in the state of Florida. It's just that they didn't recount it, well enough in time, and the Supreme Court there said, hey, look, it's Bush that's your next president. By the way, when you point out that Al Gore actually did technically win Florida, a lot of people indicate that means that you liked Al Gore. I didn't. I fucking hated Al Gore, but he did win the state technically. Yeah, I mean, Al Gore technically won the election, but who gives a fuck? Would he have done any fucking better than George W? Yeah, I mean, he was the vice president for Bill Clinton. No, the bubble still would have popped. He might have kicked the can along the road with Clintonian policies longer, and then the bubble just would have burst even fucking harder. Just think of how bad we'd be in a depression right now, oddly enough. Maybe we wouldn't have gotten involved in Iraq, but we'd probably be in a depression, so who would fucking care? Either way, we get screwed. It wouldn't have mattered who won the... Ross Perot. We should have voted for fucking Ross Perot. Things would be so much better now. Or put a robotic skeleton inside Ronald Reagan's corpse and just decide that that's the king, and we're just going to keep his brain alive in this machine for the rest of time. That's a joke. I'm not a big Reagan fan either. But yeah, someone said that Florida was called for Trump. They should call it. I mean, how many more votes have to come in before you realize that it's insurmountable? I'm not seeing it called on Decision Desk or Politico. And I mean, I'm not watching like the news because I'm making a live stream. So, yeah. But yeah, we've got some fucking results coming in and Trump sweeping it up. In Ohio, he's still behind. Depending on which site you look at, though, it's a vastly different amount. And I'm not actually sure which of these sites is more accurate right now. But, I mean, Kasich is running away with it by more than 10 points. In better news for Trump, though, Cruz is so far down there. He's barely in the double digits, which doesn't bode well for him for Missouri or Illinois, by the way. If the national polling is close to being correct, you would expect some of that support to have been siphoned from Ted Cruz in some of the marginal heartland regions. If that's actually the case, and we'll get to see as Missouri and Illinois come in, we'll get to see both that and the result of the protests turned riots at the Trump event there with the canceled Chicago rally. I have a sneaking suspicion a lot of Chicagoans that would have maybe voted with the Democrats or maybe not voted will turn out to support Trump. Specifically because they saw the violence in their own community as the result of the sort of socialist horde there paid by George Soros and Bill Ayers and so forth. That's, by the way, not a conspiracy at this point. It's MoveOn.org is actively soliciting donations for additional disruptions. That doesn't go along very well with the white middle class, whether they're self-proclaimed Republicans or not. And a lot of them in the Midwest, especially, are not Republicans. They're all a bunch of Rust Belt Democrats. And they're going over heavily for Trump. Yeah, Pixelator, I'm not surprised. I have a feeling that a lot of people who wouldn't have come out to bother voting ended up jumping aboard the Trump train in Illinois. I'm going to check here to see. I can't remember if it's 8 or 8:30 that the results from Illinois and Missouri start coming in. But I mean, either way, it's going to take a while for that to be tallied up. We see what's happening in North Carolina. It's still saying 0% of precincts. That's obviously wrong because they've got over 250,000 votes cast, and refreshing it does no good. I'm going to check if Politico is actually saying something differently here. Yeah, Trump's still about 20 points ahead in Florida, so it's on par with what his polling was at. Yeah, 0.6 reporting in North Carolina. Trump is tolerably ahead. That's likely to continue. He's likely to win that state. Trump is actually getting crushed by Kasich in Ohio, but again, other than people that were trying to make Trump fans, I guess, complacent and optimistic, that was a fairly expected result. And I don't expect, just with the less than 1% of the votes in, Kasich probably wins Ohio, which means Trump doesn't technically become inevitable tonight. But I mean, Rubio will drop out if he's not a complete moron. That's number one. Ted Cruz might very well not win either Missouri or Illinois. and could underperform. If what I'm looking at, if these totals are close to the truth, Ted Cruz is barely breaking double digits in Ohio. He's in the mid-teens in Florida. He's barely in the low 30s, really, in North Carolina. I mean, the Deep South was an area Ted Cruz early on said he had to win in order to be nominated, and he's lost every single deep southern state. It looks like he's going to lose North Carolina. Also, prediction going forward. Let's say Trump wins North Carolina and Florida. Expected. I mean, basically certain at this point. Expect Trump to lay off the nativistic content, which he specifically used to win the Deep South Baptist sort of nativist voters, and focus a lot more on jobs and the economy, and he'll start attacking Obama a lot more, specifically because now the race moves mostly to the Rust Belt for a while. Now, Trump doesn't have to worry about losing like New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island. Those states, I mean, I think he's got like a 30-point lead in some of these states. He's not worried about those, so he doesn't need to play it up. He just needs to stay the course. The nativistic content, the Mexico will build the wall, they're taking our jobs. He'll still talk about trade deals, especially with China. But the sort of Mexico will build the wall stuff, he's not going to be talking like that as much anymore. You've even seen it in the last 48 hours, now that the final polling was in. The races began. The early votes were coming in. He was optimistic in Florida and North Carolina. You saw what he did. What he's doing now, he's saying Ted Cruz raises the Bible, puts it down, and lies. He's attacking Cruz's religiosity, and I'll tell you why. He's hoping that Cruz will take the bait and start spouting off about Jesus, which will lock him more firmly into the heartland. Trump doesn't need to win a single flyover state, and probably won't win a single flyover. The only state out there other than the West Coast that he's likely to win is Arizona and maybe Colorado. And that's all he needs to do well in out there. Actually, I think Colorado already voted and doesn't actually send delegates in the normal way. Well, either way, the West Coast and Arizona. Wyoming went heavily for Cruz, like Montana, Utah, and so forth. He doesn't need to win those states. He doesn't count on winning those states. He locked Ted Cruz out of the Deep South. Now he's simply got to lock Ted Cruz into the heartland. He doesn't have to worry about Rubio going forward, because even if he stays in, he's utterly collapsed. He's only got to worry about Kasich. The only way to outcompete Kasich in the Rust Belt is to talk more heavily about jobs. And he's started to attack Quiet Kasich, specifically on the token of he's for the TPP, he's for Common Core, he's against coal and steel. He's a globalist, insider, and so forth. Kasich winning Ohio doesn't really give him much of a springboard to winning the surrounding states, though, because he's the governor of Ohio. He's not the governor of Indiana or Wisconsin or any of these other states. He's not even going to be on the ballot in Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania is not a very religious state. Cruz can't compete there. Kasich won't be on the ballot, and Rubio probably won't be in the race. Who do you think wins Pennsylvania along with its very large number of delegates? Donald Trump by a landslide. Further cementing what I predicted before. Trump is likely, after Ohio, to win every state east of the Mississippi River, locking Ted Cruz into winning the flyover states, which gives him very, very few delegates. Most of those states are proportional anyway. Trump, if he takes a good lead tonight, will probably get a few delegates across the board in most of those flyover states. That's all he needs. And by the way, he doesn't need to get to 1237 to become the nominee. He just needs that to become inevitable in the sense of, well, now no one can even challenge the fact that I'm the nominee. All he needs is like 1,000. That's all he needs to do is be ahead of Ted Cruz by at least a couple hundred delegates, and they're going to declare him the nominee. They're not crazy enough to deny it to him at that point. But let me look back here at the results, see if we got anything for Illinois. No. Oh, Missouri results starting to come in very, very small and preliminary from one county. Donald Trump 41, Ted Cruz 31. And that's actually, that's out in the evangelical part of the state. If that holds, then Trump's about to win Missouri, but it's obviously way too early to tell. Florida's been called for Trump, so as you can see, Rubio's banter was just a smokescreen to get his hardened supporters out. And that hardened support base in his fucking home state turned out to be about a quarter of the voters. Donald Trump has won Florida now, along with 99 delegates. That's the big prize of the night. That's basically, he could have lost all the other 4 states and gotten a handful of delegates from those that are technically proportional in a roundabout way. And it'd still be in the lead as far as delegates. It's almost 100 delegates from this one fucking state. This is a state that Ted Cruz would have wanted to win. Marco Rubio needed to win. I expect him to drop out tonight since he's lost Florida, and he's an idiot if he doesn't, or being paid. You know, you think if your political career is already over because you just lost your home state, you might as well stick it in as long as Mitt Romney's signing the check, so to speak. You know, at least you can retire. Get your Senate. You still get your pension from having been in the Senate. I can't even imagine how many tens of thousands of dollars somebody like Rubio gets every year for having been a former senator in an urban state. Here in Vermont, former like senators and representatives get a hell of a lot less than in some states. I think John McCain, I think he gets over $1 million a year by being a senator from Arizona. It's astonishing. Why the fuck are you paying someone who screws over the entire country so much money? Give him like 10 cents an hour. Make him work for illegal immigrant cleaning toilets wages and see how many people want to be in Congress then. Probably not so many. Then ban him from making $10,000 a bowl speeches to groups of rich donors. But yeah, Trump's already won Florida, which means Rubio's toast. He's comfortably ahead in North Carolina. 4% reporting now, and he's still, it looks like, about 5.5 points ahead. Likely to hold. Not certain, but likely. The margin of victory there is going to be smaller than Florida. He really focused heavily there. He didn't even really do much in North Carolina because it's deep south. They're going to vote with the rest of the deep south at the end of the day. Kasich is 12 points ahead of Trump in Ohio. It's still 0% reporting, but it's probably going to stay about that margin, or 0.2% reporting. You could see an upset. I mean, Trump could suddenly surge or turn out to be the winner in the rest of the counties that don't have anything reporting, and even the odds. But I wouldn't expect it. For those of you who do support Trump, he's probably not going to win Ohio, and he was never favored. I favored Kasich to win Ohio for some time now. I simply said that because of recent events, it was less of a certainty than it was before. We now have a second county, Monroe County, 20% reporting in. Trump in 2 fairly religious parts of Missouri is still ahead. And if that holds, he'll probably win the state of Missouri. He'll probably win all the different districts and get all the delegates there. It'd be funny if he turned a technically proportional state into a winner-take-all state by default. It'd be very funny. But right now, I'm going to take a quick break because I'm almost out of tea here. I've actually got a yerba mate tea. It's got some caffeine and other stimulants in it, but it also helps relax the voice more than coffee. I had been drinking coffee before, and my voice gets hoarse. When I drink the tea, it doesn't get hoarse. I'm not subscribing to the vegan anarchist because I don't support anarchism. I don't like anarchism. It's stupid. It just leads to totalitarianism in a roundabout way. Communism is evil. Anarchism is stupid. Yeah, but I've got to go get some more tea, probably a bite to eat, maybe some fucking crackers with peanut butter. But for a quick update for those just joining, Trump has won Florida. He's comfortably ahead in North Carolina. He appears to have taken a small early lead in Missouri, which could be a sign of things to come when all the counties start reporting. He'll probably win Missouri. He'll probably win Illinois. It's still up. Cruz has a chance there. Technically, Kasich does, but let's face it, he fucking doesn't. Kasich is holding on to a significant lead in Ohio, expected. If Trump wins just 4 states tonight, I mean, Rubio has no path forward already. Kasich will be lambasted. I mean, he is still in 4th delegate-wise after Marco Rubio, even after Marco Rubio drops out. Ted Cruz gets like a few dozen delegates. He's going to end up like 300 delegates behind Donald Trump. How the fuck does he have a path forward? He keeps claiming I'm the only one who can beat him, and he keeps losing to him. Ted Cruz is insane. But yeah, monarchism, I haven't studied enough about it to know. I've heard of the name. But anyway, I'm going to go get some more tea here so that my voice doesn't get all hoarse. I don't want to sound like Alex Jones, in other words. Buy my filters. Now, I don't want to sound like that, so I'm going to go get some tea. Hopefully, we'll have some better results in a few minutes here when I get back from Missouri and Illinois. So I'll be right back, folks. Give me like 5 minutes, and I'll be all set. Yeah, Jeb Bush won 38,000 votes. in Florida without being in the race. Half as many as Rubio or some shit. But yeah, I'll be right back. So in a few minutes. All right, folks, I'm back. We're going to have some more live election coverage. And so after I look at these fucking results here on Politico, hopefully some more banter and ranting. Missouri, oh yeah, Donald Trump has opened up an early lead. It's only 0.1% reporting, so don't read too much into it. It could be a total fluke, but if that were to hold true, Trump would win everything in the state. He's at 54.8%. In North Carolina, we now have almost 5% reporting. He's still about 5.5 points ahead there, which is a good indicator that he's about to win North Carolina. It'll take him a while to call it, though, because it's closer than Florida. Trump has won Florida, by the way. Kasich is far ahead in Ohio, but technically not with that many precincts actually fully reported, 12 points ahead or almost. Ted Cruz, meanwhile, as predicted, cannot compete in these eastern states outside of the South, which after tonight has completely voted. That's why I say Ted Cruz is doomed. It doesn't matter. His national polling total doesn't matter because a lot of that support is in the deep South, which has already voted, or in the heartland where, you know, he was going to win anyway. Trump isn't even bothering to compete in the heartland. He's the only one going out there to hold rallies in the heartland, which keeps giving him second place victories and a few delegates here and there, but that's really all he needs. Trump is focusing on the eastern states. He knows they're less religious. They're more focused. The people in the heartland, a lot of them, especially within the RNC, itself, within the Republican Party, whether it's an open or closed primary makes no difference. A lot of those people, a good 30 to 40%, they vote based on religion. Trump is never going to convince them that he's more religious than Ted Cruz. And in fact, he wants to do the opposite. He wants to cast himself as the less zealous, less reactionary alternative to Cruz. You're going to see him do that in the upcoming weeks. He's going to get off the nativism kick because the Deep South has already reported, and he's already denied Ted Cruz the Deep South that he needed, which means Ted Cruz is done. He can keep his campaign going after tonight, though. It's impossible for him to get the delegate total that he needs because obviously Cruz isn't winning Ohio, doesn't have a chance there. Kasich and Trump are sharing about 80% of the vote there. Florida, again, Ted Cruz not doing too much down there, partially because Rubio's still there. If Rubio had dropped out, Ted Cruz might have stood a chance if he had absorbed all that support. He'd be near where Donald Trump currently is. Right now, though, it looks like the entire center of the state and even most of southern Florida has gone for Donald Trump. Everything except for Miami-Dade County. And one little county up here, Baker County, other is still winning. That was the case earlier, I believe, with Seminole County. Obviously, that was a temporary thing as the results came in. But Trump has won Florida. Kasich is almost certain now at this point, even with only 0.3% of the precincts in, to win Ohio. It may change. That's still a very low proportion of the overall votes. But the actual total vote tally down there is counting 205,000. That's a fairly substantial lead, even if that's likely to be only about 10 to 15% of the votes cast. It's still a pretty good indicator Kasich is likely to win Ohio. It may be wrong. Trump still has a chance, but it's an outside chance and growing more outside every time this page updates. In North Carolina, it looks like the sort of urban centers of North Carolina actually went for Cruz, which is pretty funny since they would have gone for Rubio if he hadn't collapsed. Oddly enough, Donald Trump's winning total would be higher over his nearest competitor, North Carolina, if Rubio hadn't completely fucked himself. But little Marco is actually in the double digits at exactly 10.0% North Carolina, which has to be some consolation, even if he's getting beaten over the head in Ohio, losing his own home state, not really on the board for the most part in Missouri. Right now, though, we have multiple counties coming in, and Trump has opened up an early lead in Missouri, even if it's less than 1,000 votes cast. According to Decision Desk, let me look at Politico because that might have a different result. It's roughly the same there. I think Politico is actually a little bit ahead. Trump, again, 15 or so point lead. If that holds, if Trump wins Missouri, that's a state going forward that I didn't expect him to necessarily win. He had a very, in the last few days, because of different things that happened, I said maybe he has a slight advantage there, but it's by no means insurmountable, and it depends on evangelical turnout. The same is basically true in Illinois. It depends on whether you're getting a higher turnout from the evangelical side of Illinois, sort of the corn belt of the state, or the Chicago area and Springfield and the outlying areas therein. It really depends. If the urban vote's higher, with Rubio being the only other urbanite candidate really who could compete with Trump, with him collapsed, if the urban and suburban areas come in heavily, Trump wins Illinois and Missouri. If the evangelical areas have higher turnout, most of that's Cruz support. It looks like in Missouri, though, Trump stands a fairly good chance of grabbing that state as well. You now have almost 2,000 votes in, and the lead appears to have held at the same degree. We'll see, though. We have to wait and see how the sort of Kansas City region comes in, St. Louis County as well, of course. We have to wait and see what happens there. Until you get results in those big urban centers, it's almost not worth talking about. Illinois, I'm not seeing any results yet. They may have come in at 8:30. I think Illinois does actually come in at 8:30, but Trump has won Florida. Kasich's far ahead, but not certain to win Ohio. Trump appears to be winning North Carolina by single digits, certainly, but more than 5 points, which is fairly good. It's a fairly good, and Trump has grown his rural support, it looks like, in the Deep South, as opposed to the urban areas, which are actually going for Ted Cruz, which is hilarious. And now Trump, is recalculating here, is actually 8 points ahead with a larger number of the votes in. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to go back to chat here. I've got more tea. This time having the peach tea again. The yerba mate has caffeine in it. And I don't, it's after 8 o'clock. I don't really want to be up till, 3 or 4 in the morning. So we'll see what happens here. No, I'm not going anywhere, Derek. Yeah. Oh, Trump winning Illinois with less than 1% reported. Oh, you're using CNN. I don't, CNN lags me a bit, honestly, but it's on Politico now as well. Yep. Trump has opened up a lead in Illinois. Actually, he's over 50% on this count in Politico. If he wins both Missouri and Illinois, it becomes extremely difficult for Ted Cruz to break out of the heartland. It becomes very difficult for Kasich to win anything else, honestly. Maybe Indiana, maybe, and that's basically it. He's not even on the ballot in the next state over in Pennsylvania, which otherwise might be a state he could do fairly well. He didn't get enough signatures. Kasich's not even on the ballot there. Rubio was the last remaining obstacle to Trump being the nominee. And I say that because before he collapsed, he had a large national presence and was challenging or even beating Trump in the suburban regions. We saw this in Virginia. Trump did not win by a large margin there. Rubio conglomerated most of the support in the D.C. suburb outlying districts, and Trump barely squeaked by because he happened to have a lot more rural support. However, without Rubio in the race, Ted Cruz has to compete for rural hotspots in the East where he's already comfortably behind Trump. And Kasich, other than his "I'm an insider and I have experience" card, has no advantage. And that advantage, arguably, in this political climate, is a severe disadvantage. The Eastern Coast region would have gone comfortably for Trump anyway. Having won Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, down to Virginia, the entire Deep South has gone for Trump. Having won all of that, you can see the picture beginning to emerge of what the final result would be, and it looks mysteriously like 2012, if Ron Paul had managed to pull off a win in Minnesota and Gingrich lost the Deep South and ended up not winning anything. That is that Ted Cruz is winning basically the same regions Santorum won in 2012. Now, Santorum didn't get out until late April, fairly late in the race. However, this is going to go to a 3-man race far earlier. That 2012, you had a 4-man race until right before the convention, when it finally was 3 people left that were still technically there. And Mitt Romney had clinched the nomination. This time around, it's only the middle of March. You're going to get to a 3-man race when Rubio leaves the field. This could become a 2-man race relatively quickly because Kasich is unlikely to make any further headway in the sort of lower lakes region. It's relatively difficult for Kasich going forward because he was such a late starter. He got in late. He only campaigned very early on in New Hampshire. He didn't build a base anywhere else. He had maybe 1 or 2 field offices in some of the important areas of the country, and that's about it. He's far behind in the fundraising. He's far behind in infrastructure. I don't think he can sustain himself against a prolonged attack by Donald Trump, and Donald Trump has begun to run a more mainstream style campaign lately. He still, however, has a massive advantage with the fact that his support base is so much more hardened. Ted Cruz has maybe 15% hardened support. We've seen Rubio's fall into about 10 or a little less. That's his long-term floor of support, below which the candidate's support won't go until they drop out. It's like Ben Carson. Ben Carson was averaging almost that high right before dropping out, even though he obviously couldn't win. He had won nothing. He came in 3rd or 4th in most states. He still had a stubborn floor of support that would remain with him till the end of the race because they were people that were convinced that he should be the nominee. He was the one that they wanted to vote for. It was a stubborn support floor. Rubio's is obviously bottomed out at around 10%. Ted Cruz has about 15. Donald Trump's floor, though, is above 30, which is why I say he's basically the inevitable nominee. If he wins both Illinois and Missouri tonight, which is, I believe, possible looking at what I'm seeing, then I would say certainly that's a likelihood. Trump with 2,500 votes cast, is comfortably ahead right now in Missouri. Illinois, it's the map on a decision desk doesn't really line up. That shows Ted Cruz winning Cook County with, well, less than 1% reported. But it doesn't really seem to connect to what I'm seeing on Politico. This is a frequent problem. You have different sites, and they just they don't agree with one another. It's an affliction. Trump is still far behind in Ohio, but it's only 0.4% counted. However, Kasich probably has about a 99% chance just based on these numbers of winning there. Trump is still 5 points ahead in North Carolina with almost 10% counted. That's unlikely to change. I think Trump has probably won North Carolina. Expected. North Carolina and Florida were sort of the states that I counted on Trump winning handily. Illinois and Missouri, I said, well, you know, he'll almost certainly get at least one of them, possibly two. Ohio was a long shot. Really depended on turnout, who came to the polls. Florida, though, it was basically certain that he was going to win. Rubio can complain all day about the polls are wrong. No, we're going to pull this one off. We're going to have victory. He knew he wasn't going to win his home state. He knew it. He could, yeah. Let's get into the Ben Shapiro bullshit. That Michelle Fields woman was not assaulted in any way, shape, or form. She was very gently pushed out of the way. It's on video from multiple angles. The lawsuit is dead on arrival at a court, and Ben Shapiro is a Zionist and a neoconservative who is just hoping, I guess, to form a successful sort of independent spin-off from his short career at Breitbart. That's all he's doing. He can pretend that it's about solidarity all he wants. It's really about the fact that he doesn't like the fact that Trump said he'd be neutral on Israel. That's the only reason why all these evangelocons are pissed off at Trump. It's because he wants to actually go forward with a possible two-state solution. For a lot of Zionists, you got to realize most of the Zionists in the world, they're not Jewish. They're evangelical Christians. I don't understand why they have this weird outlook on the world. They proclaim that this little strip of land that was built by secular nations, is armed and funded by secular nations, that is technically a Goyim state by the standards of Orthodox Judaism, which is why a lot of the sort of Orthodox community here protests against Israel constantly. They pretend that that's a biblical thing, that they're the chosen, mystic, magical people of the Lord Jesus Christ and Jehovah. You know, they don't even believe in Jesus, but somehow they're the chosen people. You don't even really see this claim being made so much by Jews as you do by evangelical Christians who happen to associate themselves with the concept for votes and power. Really, really regrettable that they're so short-sighted. They're a dying breed as well. Their power level has been decreasing since the Reagan administration over time. Obama, by the way, one of the very small number of things that he's done that made any sense to me was telling Netanyahu to shut the fuck up because his rhetoric was stupid. Netanyahu, of course, responded by going before Congress and sitting there and pausing for 5 minutes to great applause from the Republican side, showing who the neocons were. Donald Trump is not a neocon Zionist. Again, when he claims to be religious, it's make-believe. We know he's not religious. It's the same as when he claims, oh, well, I don't support gay marriage. Yeah, he does. He's been supporting it since the 90s. He's actually duping a lot of religious Republicans, but the thing is, there's now a disconnect between the Deep South and the Heartland as far as the evangelism goes. The Baptists, the Deep Southerners, they're so worried about the border and immigrants and ISIS that they're going to support him anyway. Jesus used to take the wheel. Now he takes the back seat in the Deep South. As far as the Heartland go, the Heartland voters, they're still on board with the it's Jesus stuff. But yeah, Zionism is a dying breed in the GOP. In a few cycles, it will no longer be important for people to shill on behalf of Netanyahu and people like him. The funny thing is, the party people were hoping would win for peace was the other party, not Netanyahu's party, is actually just as warmongering as Netanyahu's party. The sort of Ariel Sharon style moderates, so-called. You know, Ariel Sharon was a war criminal and a completely mad butcher. But later on in his life, he decided that he didn't like war so much anymore and formed a party that was moderate. And then all of a sudden he has a stroke and goes into a coma. I think that it was an assassination attempt gone horribly wrong, honestly. I think they killed Sharon off to keep a two-state solution from emerging, because it's called boiling the frog. What Israel wants to do is slowly settle all the outlying land that they can. Sharon himself spoke of why they would do this. It's specifically because anything that they're holding, should a two-state solution be forced, would remain theirs. Anything where any place they don't have a presence in would then become Palestinian. So they're naturally going to try to settle the outlying districts, at least of Jerusalem, because they want it to be their capital. It's the Zionist plan. It's not even really, some Zionists are imperialists. They literally want everything from Syria down to the Sinai. The more pragmatic Zionists are more concerned with simply gobbling up as much of what's now Palestine as possible. When Sharon decided to withdraw from the West Bank or the Gaza Strip, I can't remember which, a lot of these people saw him as a traitor. They said, basically, they were like, oh, well, you're giving up part of our homeland, because they want the whole thing. They've been in control of the Republican Party under its evangelocon leaders for quite some time. Although you got to realize the neocons aren't really religious. They don't even really believe in it. It's just convenient for them for voting purposes. Bush probably doesn't even believe in Jesus. He probably doesn't even believe in the story of Jesus. But he's still a Zionist because it's convenient to do so to get a lot of votes. But I'm going to look back here and see what's happening votes-wise. Oh, there's now less than a 10% gap between Kasich and Trump. Trump's still, almost 10 points behind and probably not going to win Ohio, but the gap appears to be narrowing. That could be from some of these outlying regions coming in finally. It's taken them a hell of a long time, though, to count those fucking votes up. Trump's still about 5 points ahead in North Carolina, 12.7% counted. Trump is now winning Cook County. With 1.4% in, Trump is leading in Illinois by over 40 points. He's 15 points ahead of Kasich, who's in second, and Ted Cruz is in third now with 22. Another reason why Ted Cruz is fucking... And wait till Wisconsin. The same thing's going to happen. Kasich will take second place. Ted Cruz will get nothing in Wisconsin. The same will probably happen in Indiana. These are Kasich's proximity to Ted Cruz in the polling in some of these states is screwing Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz's very presence only matters in the heartland. That's why Trump is winning. It doesn't even matter that these races are proportional. You think they're going to deny him the nomination if he's 300 points ahead of his nearest competitor? Of course they're not. Not going to have any real broker deals going on. In Missouri, 5,200 votes in, Trump ahead 40 to 29 for Ted Cruz. So roughly 11 points ahead there. I wonder if that agrees, though, with Political's count. Politico, sorry. Yeah, Politico is way behind tonight. I don't know why. They chose the worst possible night, too. Like, all eyes are on this race. Nobody's paying attention to the fucking Democrats. It's like, we already know who's going to win. It's Hillary Clinton. It's kind of boring to watch Bernie Sanders chug along. He's still gaining ground nationally, but at the same time, does he really have a chance? Not really, ultimately. Let's see. Hillary's winning Missouri. Hillary's already been declared the winner in North Carolina. Hillary's winning Ohio. Hillary's winning Illinois. Hillary's been declared the victor in Florida. See, she's winning about the same states that Trump is for entirely different reasons, because her one competitor is a socialist and can't compete for the independent voters. Those few independent voters that are bothering to vote for the Democratic Party are mostly voting for Hillary. I hate to say it. The Bernie bros sort of people get really upset when you point this out, but I hate to say it, Bernie Sanders' support is not as high as some of you think. Ari, if you don't like the fact that I oppose Zionism, you can find a different fucking channel to listen to. I don't really care. Yeah. Identify yourself as just a joking around troll or be banned. Yeah, I'll just... Here, I'm putting you in a fucking timeout. There, you're in a timeout now. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, having that sort of power is fun. I've never actually done that before. Most of the time, I just let people rant, but I'm not going to have someone spamming the chat constantly. I don't care if you want to call me all sorts of names. Just don't spam the chat. You know, think of different names. You know, if you want to call me a fucker and a shithead and a bitch, that's okay. But just don't call me fucker 3 or 4 times in a row, because then it gets boring. Yeah, you can call me fascist too. That's all right. Yeah, or a goy. No, I didn't ban Airy. I just gave him a timeout. If he's just a bot, which is also possible, then he'll probably log out before the timeout's over. Yeah, very power hungry. But yeah, if anyone else has any other like political, religious, whatever questions, comments, it doesn't really matter. Like I've said before, for anyone who might be new to this stream, the reason I don't have the video on right now is because my connection is not powerful enough to keep the live stream going if the video is playing. Either that or it's going to go down to like 144p or something like that, and it's going to look like I'm made of Legos, so what's the point? It's much easier to just use the audio than it's you know, rather effective. It's nice and clean audio. It's better than most of the audio streaming services that are out there. Honestly, YouTube is very good for audio streaming in this general format. And it's got the, you know, it's got the chat in there. Everyone can connect and so forth. Yeah, I don't expect Kasich will cut a deal. Well, Kasich will remain in the race. He'll be the third wheel candidate now that Rubio's out, because the people who still liked quiet Rubio mostly have already joined Kasich. That gets him up to around 15 to 20. It's actually not a bad position to be in when you're the third place candidate. It's not like he's in the single digits like Rubio has been for the last couple of weeks since his shitty debate performance. And Rubio should have known better. Rubio knew his support came because he seemed quiet and safe and centrist and sensible. As soon as he destroyed that illusion, as soon as he dispelled the illusion that he was actually a quiet, sensible individual, that's when he collapsed. Chris Christie's attack on him only temporarily staggered him. It didn't even matter in the long run, other than on like Super Tuesday. What really fucked Rubio was Rubio. It was his debate performance. He screwed up his own campaign and didn't want to admit that he had screwed up at all. He keeps saying, oh, well, I'll win Florida. Well, you know, you just lost Florida by 20 points to somebody who's from New York City, who's, he, you know, he owns a couple golf clubs down there, and that's his presence in the state of Florida. Rubio outspent him almost 10 to 1. He outraised him like 5 to 1. Rubio's the candidate with over 200 major endorsements. Trump has like 20 at this point. You know, his most major endorsement is Chris Christie. Just think about that for a moment. Chris Christie, who had polled 7th or 8th in a lot of these early states that voted. Rubio had every possible advantage. He had Mitt Romney on his side and everything, and he gets fucked in his own home state. You know, he doesn't even do that much better than Ted Cruz. There was a brief time in the polling where I expected Rubio might actually come in third in his own home state, which, I mean, his career would be effectively over. It probably is. You've just seen the end of Rubio's career. He's not going to get reelected to the Senate after getting crushed like this, especially when the next president is likely to be someone he ran a dirty campaign against, which is Trump. Very unlikely that he's actually going to get the backing of the RNC because the Trump might pull some strings, to say the least. Yeah, Hillary has been winning basically everything. That's why the Democratic race is so goddamn boring. There's only 2 people in it. It's obvious who's actually winning. People were talking about the possibility of a Sanders upset in Ohio, and I just laughed my ass off. Like, you know, not going to happen. But yeah, Kasich is 9 points roughly ahead of Trump, but it's only 4% reporting. It's very difficult because it's going so slowly. Trump is up by 5 points in North Carolina with 13% in, although I think this is actually lagging behind Decision Desk. I'm reading Politico right now. Missouri, Trump is holding on to a 6-point lead there with 0.5% reporting. Not a bad early lead, by the way. 5% reporting in Illinois, and Trump is still, with 5% in Illinois, Trump is 20 points ahead of Kasich, who is roughly tied with Cruz. Now, if that holds, it'll be the news of the night. It won't be Rubio lost Florida because everyone already fucking knew he was going to lose Florida. It'll be Trump absolutely crushes his opponents in Illinois, getting most of the delegates. That's another bit. That's got the second largest total of delegates tonight, not Ohio. The only difference is Ohio's winner take all. But if a candidate wins 45% of the vote in Illinois and nobody else is doing more than barely cracking 20, most of those delegates, a large number, go to Trump. Well, that gets him more than halfway. In a single night, he gets more than halfway to the delegate total he needs to be nominated. It makes him inevitable, essentially. This is what I was looking for. He needs to, in order to become inevitable, since he's probably not going to win Ohio, he needs to crush his foes in Illinois and win Missouri, at least by a few points. He needs to win Missouri to get the delegates that are up for grabs for whoever wins the state as opposed to from each district. A little bit of a frog in my throat, or maybe a toad. It's weird because Trump's winning all of these states on the outer fringes of Ohio. It's almost like a shell around the state of Trump supporters, like Kasich being slowly surrounded or something. I don't know. Maybe he campaigned all around the outside of the state and left the interior alone. I don't know. But Kasich's still leading by single digits. It's not a huge win, although Kasich would have had to drop out if he doesn't win Ohio, which looks like Kasich has won Ohio. It hasn't been called, but 5% in, he's still almost 10 points ahead. He's almost certainly got it. Trump's still clinging to a significant lead. North Carolina, 21.9% in. He's still got a 5-point lead. It looks like he's won that. Trump still has a 15-point lead in Illinois with 5.5%. It looks like he's kicking ass in the Chicago area. Well, I wonder if that has something to do with it. It looks like Trump has actually massively increased his vote share. Let's see what it is in the neighboring areas. Yeah, because he's... let's see, what's he winning by down there? Yeah, he's winning like by 42 there. He's winning by like 35% in Lake County. But in the Chicago area is winning with over almost 45%. It looks like the protests did play a role. My prediction is now that Trump probably will win Illinois by a larger margin than expected, certainly. Probably what's happening here is that all of those white middle-class Democrats and independents and working-class Republicans broke far more heavily for Trump in the Chicago area because they got to see firsthand the root of people like George Soros, Bill Ayers, and especially because they saw every other candidate attacking Trump for, trying to hold a rally in Chicago. I think a lot of people got very mad there. I mean, at least a few extra tens of thousands of votes probably will go Trump's way. That probably gives him the state of Illinois. In Missouri, now he's almost 10 points ahead with 1% of precincts reported. It looks like Trump is probably going to win Missouri and Illinois, which basically fucks Ted Cruz, kind of fucks Kasich as well. It gives him 4 states. Can you imagine? I said going forward he was probably an inevitable nominee if he wins 3 states. He only needed Illinois or Missouri. He didn't need both of them. But it looks like he's actually going to fucking win both of them by double digits, which means he gets a shit ton of delegates from those. It doesn't matter if Kasich wins Ohio. Yep, the race has been called for Kasich in Ohio, which was always likely to begin with. I'm going to close Politico because there's lagging too badly behind, and it's going to slow things down eventually. I'm going to close out the Ohio results, but yes, it looks like Kasich will win by the high single digits in the state of Ohio. I think that the precincts reporting there is lagging significantly behind the total votes, and that's why they called it with only 5% in. Trump is still leading by 5 points in North Carolina. He's leading by almost 15 in Illinois. He's leading by, he's leading by by almost 9 points now in Missouri. So it looks like Trump loses Ohio, wins everything else, which is fucking hilarious. Yeah, well, I mean, think about it. Marco Rubio won Minnesota by about 15 points. It was the only state that he won a couple. He won D.C. and Puerto Rico, so those don't really count, though. One's a territory, one's a city state. Rubio won one state and got completely fucked. Kasich is going to win one state and he'll be completely fucked. He's not going to win any further states. He doesn't, people can rant about his momentum all day, but he doesn't have any. Outside of Ohio, he's at a grave disadvantage to Trump, who is the candidate who's going to get the momentum after tonight. It means that he has locked Ted Cruz out of the eastern fringe of the evangelical heartland, which means Wisconsin is safely in Trump's hands now, probably. Indiana, Missouri, and Illinois then form sort of a firewall against Ted Cruz advancing out of his little kitty corner, his flyover states, where collectively he might get 100 delegates if he's lucky. That's the end of the contest, folks. Trump has just, if this holds steady, if Trump does, as this is saying, win Illinois by, well, now 50, now almost 20 points. It'll probably be closer to 15, the final tally. And wins Missouri. He's about 4 points ahead in Missouri still, with 1.4% counted. If Trump does win both of them and holds North Carolina, which looks likely, then he is the inevitable nominee of the Republican Party, unless he dies or gets thrown in prison or something. Is Ari still complaining here? I haven't even been paying attention to chat. Oh, well, I don't care if he calls Trump a New York liberal. No, he's probably a Cruz fan. That's why he's ranting about Jews and New York liberals and stuff. It's pretty funny. New York has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel, with the exception of, I believe, what city is it in Argentina? One of them is a bunch of Jewish individuals from like the German area actually fled there. Argentina is weird. It's actually very multicultural. I want to see Argentina. Beautiful countryside. Lots of I don't know what they call cowboys down there. It's actually really weird. There is no cruise missile. Cruz is screwed. Fuck you and me, you Nazi. I'm not gay. I'm not into that. Okay. Well, Ari, I don't care if you attack me personally. Just make sure that you're mixing up the insults so that I don't notice that you're repeating yourself. That's all that I ask. Otherwise, I don't give a fuck. I put you in a timeout before because you were saying the same thing, not because you were actually insulting me. I don't care if you insult me. So mix it up a little bit. Mix it up. Yeah, calling me gay is okay. That's fine. I've never had Nazi sex, but I kill yourself and die. No, I'm not going to ban you. I'm not going to ban you, my brother. No, I won't put him in timeout again. Honestly, because once like 15-20% of the vote is in Missouri and Illinois, I'll probably call it a night because it'll be obvious who's won the states. If I expect that Trump lead to hold in Illinois, it's closer in Missouri. Ted Cruz could still win there. But as it creeps up towards 20% of the precincts reporting, that likelihood will decline unless he takes the lead. It's the same case in North Carolina. Trump's only ahead by 4 points now in North Carolina, but he got about a quarter of the vote coming in. It looks like most of the counties are safely for Trump. And remember, when I'm looking at these maps, I'm basically looking at a breakdown of their population. If physically 50% of the map or more is for Trump, then the assumption is, hey, he's probably won, because those tallies within the counties, within those actual voting regions, probably hold up over time. If that's true, then Trump has won basically all the urban areas in Missouri, as well as some of the outlying evangelical areas, and now he's 6 points ahead in Missouri. A little bit wider margin. It looks like he's sweeping up Illinois there. It looks like he's even defeating Cruz in the evangelical parts of Illinois, which would be quite something. It would mean that maybe, just maybe, Trump is making headway among non-Baptist evangelicals. If that's the case, Ted Cruz could get challenged even in the heartland. I don't expect it to happen, but it's an outside it would become part of the realm of possibility if that's the case. We have to wait and see, though. It's only 6.3% in right now. I love peach tea. This is actually good stuff. You should try peach tea. if you're into tea at all. But yeah, let's see. I'm sure Ari is still there saying the same sort of stuff as before, but I haven't been paying attention. Yeah, Senator Cornine, yeah. Laugh, you fuckers, you're garbage, yeah. Next to Senator Cornine, yeah. I do believe I need some more peach tea for my cornininess, yeah. Yeah, Kasich crushed Trump actually in Ohio by a larger than expected margin. However, Trump currently is crushing Kasich, who's second in Illinois, which was a state he wanted to be mildly competitive in. And he appears to be beginning to crush Cruz in Missouri. And he certainly crushed Rubio. Rubio, again, this is the third time Rubio has been biggest loser of the night. He's not even on the board in any of these other states. He won one fucking county, which was his home, Miami-Dade, his home county, and then not by a large margin in Florida. At what time do you cut and run? At what time do you realize you're fucking doomed? If he stays in the race, then it's going to be clear that he's being paid to do so. But, I mean, it's not going to matter. He'd probably go down to sub 1% support in the rest of the states. This is his home. This is the state he's the most likely to do well in, and yet he not only lost it, but loses it by almost 20 points. Roughly in line, by the way, with the polling. Ari is having some fun. Again, Ari, you're going to get put in a timeout if you don't fucking mix it up with your insults. Oh, Rubio decided that he dropped? Oh, yeah, let me I'm going to celebrate a little bit if that's the case. Oh, yep, he's gone. Oh, all your bluster was for fucking nothing. Good riddance. Donald Trump stomps Marco Rubio on Florida home turf. I bet this HuffPost article comes with that little disclaimer at the bottom about Trump being a bigoted, sexist Nazi and stuff. Oh, they have a reporting on their page, too. Let's see if theirs is remotely in line with the others. Yeah, Florida, 56. Yeah, Trump won by 20 points in Florida, so Rubio can't really. If Rubio had come in like 1 point behind Trump, maybe he could stay in and say, well, I mean, we almost won. We were so close, so I'm staying in. And maybe he could justify it, but losing by 20 points, come on, folks. It would be like if Trump were to lose New York by 20 points. People would be saying, well, if you can't win if the people that are most familiar with you fucking hate you and are supporting other people, why are you running? Poor Ruby. Little Marco's out. I can't wait to see Trump speak on that. See, I don't have any like live streams up because I'm doing a live stream. So I'm actually at a little bit of a disadvantage because otherwise I'd probably have a stream open to like, Trump press conference. He's going to rail against Little Marco at his press conference, I assure you. So he's won Florida. He won the Northern Mariana Islands. Kasich has won Ohio. Trump is still comfortably ahead in Illinois and Missouri. He's absolutely crushing everybody in Illinois. It looks like he might win Illinois by a larger margin than he won Florida. He's 20 points ahead. He was 19 ahead in Florida. And second place is basically a tie between Kasich and Cruz. This is the best possible scenario in Illinois. He gets the delegates that get given to the winner. He probably gets the lion's share of the regional delegates as well, because across the board, his support is just barely behind that of the next two people in line. He might get every delegate in Illinois if he's lucky tonight, which, I mean, that would launch him into the stratosphere far ahead of what he actually needs to be on target to get the 1237. And even winning it all in Missouri. Missouri, other than Ohio, was the state I was most sort of on the fence about whether Trump would win it. I was almost certain he would win Florida. You'd have to have massive polling error to have any other outcome. North Carolina, because it's in the same region that Trump has dominated. I said Cruz will probably do better than in the last races, but is it enough? At the end of the day, probably not. Trump's 4 points ahead. And that's with 17% reporting. So we're getting to that critical 20% mark at which you assume a fairly reliable degree of accuracy. Third was Illinois, and it looks like he's absolutely dominating there. And then fourth was Missouri. Winning in 4 of these states puts him far ahead of where he actually needs to be. It also means Ted Cruz no longer has a path forward to the nomination. Kasich is still at sub-Rubio levels as far as his... even if Rubio, by the way, in dropping out, were to say to his delegates, vote for Ted Cruz, he'd still be in a distant second place if Trump does that well in Illinois, because that's about as many delegates as fucking Rubio had. Rubio is gone. So, good. It'll raise the IQ of the race to some degree. Rubio was sort of the last national level centrist standing. Kasich's a regional. Kasich is sort of like Gingrich from 2012. Only his support is in an area that half the states have already voted in. So, Kentucky up into Ohio, Michigan, that general region. While he's not on the ballot in Pennsylvania, Trump is sweeping up the area right next to Indiana and Wisconsin. So, which way will they go? I fucking wonder. And that's basically his region of highest support. He doesn't have a lot of support in, like, southern New England, like Connecticut. New York is Trump's home state. Then you've got, of course, the heartland. Well, the heartland's going to go for Ted Cruz largely. Although, if Trump looks strong and inevitable tonight, you might see his national polling shoot up. The 53% from YouGov is still probably overestimating Trump's support, but with Rubio out, you can count on most of that support. Like I said, Rubio's remaining hardened support is primarily concerned with winning the election, because Rubio's supporters that liked him because he was quiet and sensible fled to Kasich weeks ago. His remaining floor of support, thus, are people that were concerned primarily with electability. Trump as the clear front runner after tonight, with almost half the states, with more states that he's won in than everybody else combined. Far more popular vote, having destroyed, literally destroyed the competition in 2 states, including the home state of one of the people who now is out. Trump becomes the most electable face within the race. Not Ted Cruz, who doesn't win anything tonight. Certainly not Kasich, who, won his home state. That's all he's won. The people concerned about electability are probably going to go for Trump, honestly. They'll probably put him above 50 if he's not already there. Now, North Korea's missing sub most likely was being used to smuggle methamphetamine, which North Korea pumps out in vast quantities, and probably foundered because they're incapable of performing routine maintenance. North Korea right now is under an extremely strict set of sanctions. Far more strict than they've been under for many decades. And it's starting to dry up the supply of steel and coal and things like that they need for their economy to function. Even the Chinese are turning away North Korean coal actually right now because the sanctions are so wide and unopposed. Even the Chinese are taking part in the sanctions, which is something new. Now, the Chinese were neutral on the last round of sanctions and simply didn't themselves get involved, but they allowed sanctions to move forward. This time around, they're joining on, and then you have Russia telling the North Koreans, you'd better cut it out, because at some point you're going to give a cause for war to the Western world. You've got Putin actually telling the North Koreans they might get invaded because of their rhetoric. And what does Kim do? He doesn't tone it down. He says, well, then we'll conduct a new nuclear test and missile tests and fuck you. We may be nearing that point at which the Chinese and the Russians are pissed off enough at North Korea, realize what a weakness it is for it to continue existing, that they either let the West invade, or they let the North Korean state collapse and undergo a revolution, or the Chinese or Russians or together could invade, or the South Koreans manufacture some sort of event in such a way that it allows them to retaliate and get the West involved. Something probably is about to happen in the DPRK. It's totally unlike the rhetoric we've seen before. And you got to think, you have to go back to like the 50s to find this kind of sanctions on North Korea. Well, in a fully modern world economy, things don't work the way they used to. They could start starving. You got to realize they don't even plant their rice for another month and a half or so in that climate. It's not quite as warm as a place like southern Japan or Vietnam, sort of an island climate, or in the south of Asia. They're up near Manchuria. Well, most of their land's not even arable anyway, and they're in a drought. They're undergoing a fairly severe famine right now. So there's some problems in the DPRK. You could see the state collapse. The most likely thing that would happen, though, is simply the government of Kim Jong-un is overthrown, the generals there will manufacture some sort of corruption charge. They'll kick him out and kill him along with his family. Then they'll move to a Chinese model, which will open up their country tentatively to the world. And ironically, even though I deeply oppose communism and the North Korean people are starving, it would be a terrible mistake for the West to immediately bring democracy there and reunite the peninsula. It's much better to let them transition into a Chinese-style mixed model, which is going to be closer to what they're used to. It will allow them to open up tentatively to some parts of the world, specifically China especially, begin to see some parts of the world and how they've advanced, because a lot of the people there honestly don't know what anything in the outside world even looks like, except from smuggled DVDs, and that's only the braver among them that have done things like that, and especially the young. If they were to undergo a democratic revolution, overthrow Kim Jong-un, or we invaded and did that, and they were opened up immediately to the world, it would literally break their culture's spirit in a way that we haven't seen since Japan was bombed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it would probably be worse. Ultimately, the people there mentally, I don't think could, or culturally, could even process how much they've been lied to, especially the younger individuals there. And you'd probably see millions of fucking people killing themselves. Be like, oh, my whole life is a lie. I don't have anything to fucking live for because I've never been alive in the first place. It'd be a terrible idea to open them up completely to the West immediately. You have to have a transition stage. Move them to a Chinese model. Censored, yes. You still have some corruption, some problems, but they're part of the world economy. They're not starving. Wealth begins to flow in. They get more literate. Not that they don't have high literacy as far as like reading and math goes, but, you know, literate about the ways of the world and the technology of the world. You know, you got to tell them, no, in the rest of the world, it's not normal for 50s era tractors running on coal to be tilling up the fields. It's just not normal. It's in the rest of the world. It's not normal to be sent to a labor camp for 20 years for insulting your leaders. Even in China, that doesn't happen anymore. They're corrupt as hell, but it's not quite that bad. But let me look back at these races here. Yeah, Trump's still 4 points ahead in North Carolina. Now it's getting towards 40% counted, so at this point, Trump's probably won there. He's more than 15 points ahead in Illinois. The only person ahead anywhere other than Trump is Kasich in Ogle County. Probably not pronouncing that correctly, but it's funny anyway. Looks like Trump has swept the whole Chicago area and has more than 40% of the vote. That'll give him Illinois. So you can call Illinois probably now for Trump. Now he's almost 10 points ahead in Missouri, actually. Only 3.5% counted, but, you know. And probably around 9:30-ish, I'll end this stream. But I'm going to take another quick break and let Ari hopefully grind himself down here, insulting others. It's funny. People appear to be paying a great deal of attention to what's he saying. That's actually, let me go up here and see the crazy things he's saying. I'm going to assume, though, that he's a Ted Cruz fan. If he hates people who aren't in favor of Zionism, then, I mean, if he's here because of the race, he's obviously a Ted Cruz fan, because Ted Cruz is the dedicated Zionist candidate. And when he talks about New York liberals and faggots and stuff, he's obviously far right. That's another tell for a Ted Cruz fan. Yeah, I'm putting him in a timeout again. Yeah, he's in a timeout for 300 seconds. See what happens. I don't really have as much tolerance for Ted Cruz fans anyway. They shill it up. They spam. They repeat themselves. They talk about how you're, I guess, a pinko commie if you don't support their glorious Canadian Lord and Savior, Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz isn't even eligible. That's another reason why he's doomed. So I'm going to take a quick break here. I'm not going to refill the tea since I'll probably only be here for another 20, 30 minutes anyway. The result, it's good for Trump. The reason why I'd cut it out early is it looks like the race in Illinois fairly early on is going to get called for Trump. Missouri is starting to look that way also. If he wins with 40% in Illinois, that's a very, very good indicator that the whole fucking East Coast is going to go for Trump. So I'll be right back in, a couple minutes. Use the bathroom, whatever. Get another bite to eat. I had some squash, maple squash. It's really good, trust me. So yeah, I'll be back in a couple minutes.
Oh, yeah.
All right, YouTube, I'm back and unfortunately out of my yummy tea. I kept the yerba mate tea bag in there with the peach tea, actually. It actually tastes good together. I didn't expect that. I thought it'd taste fucking disgusting, but I was like, I'll drink it anyway just because I need something to drink, but it was actually pretty good. Yeah, David Duke is an asshole. David Duke, former KKK, turned sort of, I don't know, reactionary neocon. He's just a goofball. He's like Daniel Carver, who used to be part of the whack pack on Howard Stern, is a bit more intelligent than David Duke is. The KKK is just a bunch of goofy Christians that fucking put white robes on and dance around and hold barbecues at this point. There was a time when they had like 200,000 members back in the 20s and had tens of thousands of people marching down Pennsylvania Avenue. Now today they've devolved into basically a board club for dudes with beer bellies. I don't have any love for David Duke or the Klan. They're morons, really. David Duke is a fucking neocon. The fact that he supports Palestine doesn't mean anything to me. He's still a religious reactionary. He's still a moralist. He's still an authoritarian. I'm a libertarian, so I mean, I can't be in favor of that authoritarianism any more than I can left authoritarianism, a la a corporate centrist like Hillary, or a so-called democratic socialist like Sanders. Sanders isn't a democratic socialist, folks. He's just a socialist. You know, it's retarded to make that differentiation. He does that to make it seem less scary. It's obviously not working with people who are over 40. Yeah, it'd be hard for me to be a Nazi since I'm not a German nor a libertarian, nor am I even purely white. I'm part Native American, so that sort of ethos dies at some point. Well, libertarians would protect themselves from BLM by beating them down if attacked by them. If they're, you know, I don't care if they hold protests outside of anyone's rally. It's like the protesters in Chicago. The ones that were outside of Trump's rally, they weren't doing anything wrong. They have every right to protest outside of his rally. They can protest. 100,000 of them can march down the street outside of anywhere where fucking Trump is. I don't care. It's their right to organize. But once they infiltrate the event itself and start trashing the stage and threatening people and disrupting things, that's not free expression, folks. That's a disruption of free expression. It's literally attempting to conflate free speech with blocking others' free speech. I told one person I was talking to, so you're saying that if you're on the street and you're saying your bit, you're in the pulpit, you're on the soapbox, you're speaking, and I walk up to you and cover your mouth with duct tape because I don't like what you're saying. Is that my free expression? No, it's the removal of your free speech. It breaks the non-aggression principle. So yeah. To Sid, Trump is likely to clinch the nomination because he no longer has any competition east of the Mississippi River now that Rubio's out. Rubio's remaining fans will break largely for Trump, not for Kasich, because those that would back Kasich have already broken for him. Specifically, Rubio's core of support was twofold. Half of the people liked him because he was quiet and safe and had good manners, I guess. They've already abandoned Rubio after his last debate performance when he acted like a fucking moron. They already went to their respective candidates that were their second choice. It looks like most of them went to Kasich. Some of them went to Trump or Cruz. The rest of them are going to break heavily for Trump because he's now the only person in a position capable of clinching the nomination. And those people, that 5 to 10% based on different states, is primarily worried about electability. Well, Trump is the only one left who's electable without a brokered convention, which everyone knows would be a disaster. So I predict that the majority of Rubio's remaining support goes to Trump, getting him up into the mid to upper 40s, far ahead of where Cruz will be at. Cruz will stall out below 40, I believe, and Kasich will make up the rest, 15% or so, a little more in some of the industrial states. But I mean, remember, he's not even on the ballot in Pennsylvania, which is a state Kasich could do well in. So he'll come in third place there probably. He'll probably have one or two. Some people will write him in anyway, but still, there are people still today who don't even know who Kasich is. They don't know anything about his platform. So it's a grave disadvantage. He still does not have, in all states, decent, solid organization. He has a lot less money than Rubio had, too. Ted Cruz can pull his weight, at least in the heartland, but Kasich has a small fraction of the support that Rubio had. You got to remember, Rubio's out. Rubio had several hundred major endorsements. Cruz and Kasich collectively combined have less than Rubio had before he dropped out. And no, Hillary will not be the next president. She's actually completely and utterly doomed. Unless the Republicans are suicidal enough to not nominate Trump when he ends up at the convention with either a clinched nomination or the most delegates. Other than that, yeah, it's going to be Trump versus Hillary, and Trump will win in a landslide. Now, Kasich's platform is basically, I want to work with people and bring people together. The problem is, you can see right now, nobody actually wants, even most of the Democrats don't want that. A lot of them support Sanders specifically because they hate their own party. They hate what their party's become. Yeah. Ari is going off the deep end here. Well, Hillary is doomed because the only advantage the Clintonian Democrats have is more support in the Deep South, but their opponent, Trump, has obviously energized large proportions of the Deep South, which limits it to the general swing states. And ultimately, at the end of the day, people in a place like Ohio, a place like Wisconsin, a place like Iowa, I can't see them voting for a candidate who wants to up their taxes. Obama's not popular enough. Obama's supposed 50% popularity is overestimating it, and it's also a lot of that's limited to urban areas that the Democrats win anyway, in a handful of states where there are a lot of minorities. But Hillary can get the black vote out, but the Hispanic vote, I think she'll get a historically low proportion of it. I think Trump is going to do a lot better amongst Hispanics than a lot of people think, because he's going to refine his message. Now that he's cleared up the entire Deep South and won every state there. Let me check North Carolina. Yeah, he's still 4 points ahead, almost 50% in. He's won North Carolina, let's fucking face it. Illinois, I don't know why they haven't even called it yet. He's still 15 points ahead there. He's winning by 10 points now in Missouri. Though it looks like he wins the 3 remaining states almost certainly. Trump, I believe, is going to perform much better among Hispanics than people give him credit for, because you got to remember, a lot of the recent Hispanic immigrants don't want to compete with illegal immigration because they immigrated legally, or they're from a legal immigrant family. They may know illegal immigrants, they may have no problem with them as people, but they don't want to compete with them for jobs. And well, yeah, Hillary is not going to win. She has literally a 0% chance of winning. She hasn't energized her own party. She doesn't have either of the advantages Obama had, which was he was young and he energized people on the coattails of a very unpopular Republican president. But the Republican nominee, who will be Trump, has openly attacked Bush. So a lot of those independents that are no longer partisan Democrats because they don't approve of Obama are going to vote for him. It all comes down to demographics. It comes down to independent support and energizing your own party more than it does trying to compete for people on the other side of the aisle who are still partisans. But partisans are making up an increasingly small proportion of both parties. Most of the votes that they're getting at this point, they have to grab from the nonpartisan voting pool. Obama obviously won a majority of that in 2012, but look at who his opponent was. His opponent was a complete shitfuck. The difference, by the way, between Romney and Trump, they're both rich, they're both older and white. The difference is Romney tried to hide the fact that he was a rich dude from people and pretend that he was a normal a normal middle-class individual with a flannel shirt on. Nobody fucking nobody took him seriously. Trump's unrepentant about the fact that he's rich, and he's made a successful pitch to much of the voting population, especially within the independent pool, that we should all emulate him. We should be greedy like Trump and make $1 billion off $1 million, so to speak. Well, yeah, Romney being a Mormon didn't help because a lot of the evangelicals think he's a heretic, so they didn't come out to vote for him. I have a feeling that a lot of the evangelicals, while they may not admit it, probably voted for Obama specifically because Romney was a Mormon, and they may have thought Obama was like an agnostic or kind of an irreligious individual, but to them that's actually better than a Mormon heresy, I guess, being worse than non-belief in their books. Yeah. People don't mind Bobby Jones. He's actually a self-proclaimed communist, like a literal, not a socialist, but a literal self-proclaimed communist. He's also a troll. Ask him about Wilbergia. Ask him about Wilberg and Spud Croyley, and you'll probably get some interesting responses. But where's Ari? Is Ari still? Yeah, he's still trolling. Too bad it's killing all the small. Yeah. Ari, I don't even think maybe he's not even a Ted Cruz fan. Maybe he's just a dedicated troll. That's okay. But I'm going to assume that he No, Sanders will stay until the end. Sanders isn't going to drop out. It's not like he's getting crushed in every state. He's coming in a close second or even edging out a win in a few of them. Going forward, by the way, there are quite a few states that he's actually ahead of Clinton by significant margins in. I think he's ahead in most of the heartland. The problem for Sanders is most of those states are low on delegates. What he wants to do is stay in, get as many delegates as he can, so he can get a speaking position there. And then he'll probably retire from politics, having been a second place finisher, the first Jew to win a presidential primary. That's quite an accolade for him to get. And he's from my home state. You know, I wish Bernie Sanders well. I just don't like his economic views. He wants to tax me through the ass. He wants to raise taxes on the same bracket that all freelancers fall into without reforming the tax code. He'd be taxing me at 50%. Why would I even at that point want to work? You know, it's not like I'll stop working, but I certainly wouldn't be getting ahead at that point. Right now, it's about 30%. Under him, it'd be over 50%. So what's the fucking point? Why would I support, Bernie Sanders? Yeah, Bernie Sanders is generally pro-war. It's actually funny. Ask Bobby Jones as a communist. He actually doesn't think Bernie Sanders is far left enough. Now, Missouri is getting close. Let me take a look. Missouri's not close at all. Trump's winning by 5 points. That's not a close race. He started out ahead only by 2. In Illinois, he's still he's still comfortably ahead in Illinois with almost a quarter of the votes in. North Carolina, more than 50% reporting in Trump's ahead by 4.2 points. So it looks like he's won North Carolina. I can't imagine Ted Cruz making up a 12-point deficit in Illinois. They'll probably call the race in Illinois fairly soon. Once they call Illinois, I'll probably end the stream. I might end it before that. I want to do some RuneScaping later. But, yeah. Let me check my, let's see here. Yeah. But, yeah, I had peach tea and yerba mate, sort of the mocha mint tea. No, Ari is just mouthing off, goofy. Yeah, Trump's rape essay stuff was pretty funny. It was a little bit odd, honestly, because people see him around here. They see him as sort of the kindly grandpa who's beyond reproach. The nutty kindly grandpa, but sort of the kindly elderly dude. It was rather strange. But then again, we also around here, we know he was like the hippie revolutionary. He was more of an authentic leftist than Hillary. But he was sort of a Weather Underground sort of fringe leftist, not a pacifist, which actually is holding him back, ironically. Oh, the Libertarian Party's platform with Gary Johnson regarding taxation is basically the flat tax concept is fine. Everyone would pay less because you've cut most of the government spending out. It's a much better system. But failing that, at the very least, I'm not going to support somebody who wants to increase my tax burden undeservedly. If they reform the tax code and then increase for the higher brackets, it doesn't affect me. The problem is freelancers, the self-employed, small business owners are all lumped in with those super rich people within the tax code for no apparent reason whatsoever. And corporations cheat on it all the time or take advantage of loopholes. It's like deducting. A corporation makes millions and millions of dollars. They have to pay a high tax rate, but then they deduct every little thing that they buy is meticulously accounted for by their accountants and lawyers and then deducted, which means they have very little tax burden. A small business cannot or a freelancer cannot necessarily hire the lawyer and accountant necessary to take advantage of those deductions without then getting audited and screwed. And that's the fundamental problem. It's not a level playing field, in other words, within these brackets. If somebody has a multi-billion-dollar corporation, also, you got to realize a lot of their assets aren't even in this country and thus aren't being taxed. A lot of their proceeds come from overseas. Well, they're getting taxed very little or nothing at all for a lot of their holdings. And then meanwhile, they're helping to destroy the U.S. economy. This is true. When Trump says this, he's not wrong. He gets it a little bit wrong, perhaps, on how to fix the problem. Simply reforming the tax code would go a long ways, probably further than actually trying out a tariff or any comparable system. But ultimately, if Trump were elected tomorrow and simply balanced the tax code and went after the PACs, right there, he'd be remembered as at least an above-average president, because those are two enormous issues that I think nobody else can really get to. Hillary wouldn't go after the PACs. She wouldn't she wouldn't solve the problems with the tax code. She's on board. She'll probably make it worse. She would make Obamacare even more unworkable. It'll stall out and eventually fail, just like such mixed models always will. Yeah, I already voted. Vermont has an open primary. There's no libertarian ballot to actually vote upon, so I ended up voting for Trump in the Vermont primary. He won Vermont, not by a huge margin, but he won. I ended up voting for Trump, but I'm not going to, in the general election, I'm voting for Gary Johnson, because honestly, I'm going to vote for the candidate I feel has the best overall ideas. That's Gary Johnson. I expect Trump to win. I expect him to be the Republican nominee, and I think he'd do a damn sight better than Hillary, but he's not, while he's a better candidate than Hillary, who will be his opponent, he's not the best candidate. Gary Johnson is. Yeah, I went to college. I went to UVM. So I'll be voting for Gary Johnson of the Libertarian Party. I mean, I can't really support either party, even if Trump gets nominated. Like I said, Donald Trump is a mild reformer. These people casting him as way, way out there, way on the fringe. He's not. He's a mild reformer who wants to bring us back to that sort of transition period between the Nixonian and post-Nixonian neocons, the real retards, and the more sensible paleocons, or the centrists of the Ike administration, the sort of Ike and JFK era. It's better than what we've had since the Nixon era. It's not totally better, but it is better. It's an improvement. You would need to use that as a stepping stone for additional reform. Otherwise, in another 20 or 30 years, we'll be right back where we started. It would be an improvement over today's Republican Party. Not a vast improvement, but a mild reform. But I want more drastic reform. I want an overthrow of the two-party dichotomy entirely. I want libertarianism. Anything short of that is not acceptable to me. And when I was in college, I originally studied plant and soil science. I ended up switching to politics and English. Well, technically anthropology and English, but I mean, politics had been my minor, so I already had a shit ton of credits in it anyway. I liked politics. I like anthropology. I like English. I liked plant and soil science. It's just that what UVM considers to be plant biology is mostly chemistry, and I'm not into mathematics as much. I just wanted to, I should have taken a more dedicated horticultural studies or something like that. But let me check the results one last time here. Yeah, Trump is, let's see, about 55% in. Trump is still 4 points ahead in North Carolina. I think it's safe to call North Carolina for Trump at this point. Illinois, quarter of the votes in. Trump leads by 14. Probably, again, safe to call it for him. He's 6 points ahead in Missouri with about 14% in. Can't really call that yet, but he's got a significant advantage over Cruz there and will probably win. So anyway, I'm going to end this live stream because I've got other things that I need to do. Yeah, the garden's looking a lot better this year. It's been vastly improved, and it's going to be improved significantly more as well. Once Ace Hardware gets in their cheaper manure as opposed to the more expensive, higher quality, but much more expensive stuff I've been adding to the herb bed. Once that comes in, I'm going to completely fill the biggest of the beds with about 5 inches of it. It's just going to be completely raised. It's going to be perfect. Then I'll throw a dusting of the peat moss, a bale of that on top, and mix it in, and it'll be perfect. But yeah, it's basically time to end the live stream, both because I think it started at like 7:30, didn't I? It's been a couple hours, and I have other things to do as well. Still got to take a shower too at some point. Another reason not to be on video. But just for those who may have tuned in late, Trump has won Florida, Kasich won Ohio. And Trump is right now crushing everybody in Illinois. He's holding out a significant lead in North Carolina and Missouri, and will probably win all 3 of these states. No, I'm not drunk. Not yet, anyway. No, I'm not drinking tonight, so it's all good. But anyway, I'll talk to you all soon. Peace out. If I can... Oh, that's right. I have to go back to the other fucking page just to stop the broadcast. I don't know what happens if you X out the other one. I think it keeps going and just cuts the stream on my end. But yes, for the second time here, in the name of John Cornine, peace out.